All right, call this meeting of the Highland Park Rent Control Board to order. First order of business, statement of compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. The meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 23rd, 2024, and was posted on the Borough website at www.hpborough.com and on the bulletin board at Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue, Highland Park, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. All right. So second order of business is the approval of the minutes from November 29th. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
So move second. Any objections? Minutes are approved. All right. Next order of business is selection of chairperson and selection of vice chairperson. So I had agreed to serve in this temporarily until we had a full board. Is that?
Well, that didn't happen, and I thought it was going to happen. That's why I was on the agenda. But the person who we had found has since stepped down. I don't think it would be inappropriate to go ahead with it if I don't know how long it's going to take to fill, and I would defer to you and the rest of the board as to what you want to do.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
What spot are we trying to fill?
Alternate tenant.
Alternate tenant. I had some people because I had originally reached out to, and I think Lucinda did too.
Did they fill out applications?
No, because they were interested, and then we knew that somebody else there was somebody that was already talking to the mayor.
So yeah, feel free to reach back out, and she'll reach out to them real quick and she usually interviews either on a Zoom or a face-to-face real quick, and do it that way.
All right, we'll try to get it covered soon.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
I nominate
chair, vice chair.
I nominate Heather Pierce for chair. Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? I'm happy to continue facilitating, especially because all the hard work of a chair, the chair generally does is actually a meeting facilitator. Yeah, I'm happy to continue doing that. So
all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Abstentions?
Congratulations, HP.
Hey, HP is chairing the HP board. So we need a vice chair, but I'd like to nominate Lucinda for this.
I'd like to nominate Jared.
And I was gonna go the other way, Diane, because
So we have a contested race.
Or vice chair.
Yeah. Who knew?
Well, I will say that I will decline.
yeah, honestly, I'm an open kimono. I think I'm gonna do this, be on the board for 6 more months or 9 more months until it kind of stabilizes, and then I don't see myself continuing, so I don't know if it's a viable place for me to
Well, hopefully we can convince you to stay longer.
Yeah.
We'll set that aside for
I think
now.
you'll find it less busy.
We'll table that one.
So Lucinda.
So Diane.
Any other discussion on
declined.
this?
All right.
Diane declines, Jared declines.
declined.
Well,
So I guess motion.
Motion to appoint, the chair will entertain a motion to appoint Lucinda as vice chair. I made the I guess I made the motion. I mean, I nominated you.
Mhm.
All in favor? Aye.
Do we need a second or does it matter?
Yeah, we do need a second.
sure.
Someone second.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Diane.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Abstentions? I don't know what that vote was. We had aye, or you
Aye.
voted aye. Aye. All right, ayes have it. Motion passed, motion carries. Congratulations, Lucinda.
All right.
All right. So now onto our substantive issues. We have old business from the last meeting, which was the appeal for the property on Dennison Street. We had asked for more information in the last meeting, and that has all been provided.
I do have printouts here if anybody wanted to flip
I
through.
would like.
Okay, this is
I did look at it in the email. too.
email, and then the images are here. They're grouped by apartment.
Maybe the attorney for, Michael, did you have any additional comments you wanted to open with or no?
I don't think I have any additional comments at this time.
Okay,
That's a lot of color printing, guys.
That was just me. I did that for
Really?
you guys.
a lot of good pictures.
Killed a few trees, sorry.
Yeah.
Is that it?
I'd like to.
Are we able to make additional
Why
comments?
don't you come up?
Yep.
Did want to make some comments. I'll take this back, but my client does have some more.
Oh, that's Renaissance, yeah, those are comps, I guess.
Those
Oh,
are the
okay.
comps they provided. These are
Yeah.
the apartments.
Yeah, this is.
I saw those when
This-
they were sent. These are,
Their property.
They printed weird, but there's nothing I can do about it. The rents are on the back.
yeah, I see it. So these are.
I tried my best to
I don't think we saw
inform
those by email, did we?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they were.
Oh, they were.
they were. It's just, when you printed it, there was not much to be done.
Yes, these are lovely.
So we'll take maybe comments from,
Well, maybe we
both.
should thank you for the additional material.
thank
We asked for a number of things and you responded to everything. So thank you very much. And I think the photographs of the various units are very helpful. And I think they help us focus on the difference between some of them and how they look and how you hope they'll look.
Thank you.
Maybe if you'd like to just summarize what additional material you submitted and maybe indicate based on that material, what you think might be an appropriate resolution, how would you like to have the board move forward?
Yes, very briefly, before you go, I just wanted to say very briefly, the income expense statement that was provided prior to the last hearing obviously had some expenses on it that probably shouldn't be attributable to the common building and should have probably been attributable to my client. So we submitted a corrected income expense statement. You see that in the photos that we submitted, a lot of these, two of these units have subsequently been re-rented since my client purchased the property. And one of them was very recently re-rented and rented for, I think my client could testify as to what they were re-rented for, but these are, I think my client's testimony last time was the least renovated unit. The least renovated unit was actually going for, I think, 1860 or 1840. I don't remember the exact number, but it's, I think the rents that we're seeking are pretty much in line with what the fair market rent should be. And actually a little bit less if you look at the comparable buildings that I provided. And with that, I would turn it over to my client to make any additional comments that he had.
First, I'd just like to echo, obviously, what our attorney said. The exact figure that the least renovated unit was previously rented at was 1880 as of our last meeting on November 29th. It's since been re-rented with a new tenant at 1985, and a CO was done for that. With that said, my wife and I left the last meeting and felt a certain type of way, so we wrote down some thoughts. So first, members of the board, Mr. Schmier, we first want to just thank you for allowing us another opportunity to speak. As a follow-up from the November 29th hearing, we appreciate your time and we hope that we can come to a solution today that is fair and is reasonable. I want to start by saying that my wife, Janae, and I left the November 29th hearing feeling pretty disrespected. During the hearing, members of the board spoke down to, laughed at, and mocked us. Members of the board scoffed and said things like, do you know if there is a hardship, or is there $6 million sitting in the bank that they can use? Or do you have $6 million laying around? Members of the board later went on to criticize our decision to purchase a multifamily home in Highlands Park, calling it, and I quote, a bad investment. Not only was it highly inappropriate, but in the spirit of setting a precedent, which we heard as a common phrase throughout the last hearing, this board is setting a precedent to future landlords that the fate of their hardship might not be taken seriously, especially if they're young adults or first-time landlords like us. So while our documentation and our application presented gaps in information, and I want to thank all of you for that, the feedback was delivered in a way that was, quite frankly, pretty condescending. To answer the question, we are not sitting on anywhere near $6 million. Just like our tenants, Janae and I have worked really hard. We too were once students studying across the river at Rutgers. We both received our undergrad from Rutgers. I earned my master's from Rutgers GSE. I taught religious school in New Brunswick for a number of years in an effort to give back to the community. While in college, we both worked full-time jobs, volunteered for our local community with organizations right up the street like Elijah's Promise, Play Safe in New Brunswick. We served on boards and committees and panels, just like every single one of you. I've also been serving as an officer in the U.S. Army for what will be 11 years in April, with a tour overseas in 2019. We have worked and sacrificed a tremendous amount of our time and money to purchase our first investment property, and even used the VA home loan to do so. Above all else, Highland Park has always been special to my family. When Janae and I moved to Highland Park, we actually became the 4th generation in my family to reside in Highland Park. But simply, purchasing this house was more than a business decision. It was a decision to invest back into this community. The same community that's telling us that it might be okay to lose money each month at the hands of tenants who are exploiting a broken system. I'm going to make the numbers really simple. Each month, our mortgage statement, which includes interest and taxes and principal, is $6,483.19 for this year. Our average monthly PSE&G bill is $23.31. Our average quarterly water sewer bill is $331.69, or $110.56 per month. So in an average month this year, we will pay $6,617.06. The rent for each of our units is as follows. 213-1 is $1,626. 213-2, $1,040. 215-1, $1,985. And 215-2, $1,504, for a total of $6,155 per month. We are losing $462.06 every single month, and that is before you account for a single penny toward a leaky faucet, a burst pipe in the basement, a boiler shutting off in the winter, salt or snow removal, cyclic inspections every 1, 2, or 5 years, whatever they may be, or an aging roof. Forget about the actual aesthetics, which we would love to do for our tenants. During the last hearing, the tenants of 215-2 brought into question our timeliness. A new lease agreement was presented to Nick and Michelle on November 16th. We negotiated, and very respectfully on both sides, I might add, and came to an agreement in writing to an increased rent amount of $1,954, up from $1,504. This conversation and the email exchange, as well as the sharing of updated lease agreements, all took place prior to the ordinance being introduced and passed. In a way, we're subsidizing the housing for our tenants to live under this roof. In only one unit are the tenants who are currently a graduate student earning a graduate student stipend. The rest of the tenants are working members of society, just like all of us. Some working for the county and for the state, where salaries and steps are public information. While the board shared concern about opening the floodgates for other cases in the future, we believe that our case should be heard independently based on the facts of our case and not based on whether or not it'll set a precedent. You want to set a precedent, we should not be discouraging the purchasing of property in this town, but rather inviting and welcoming homeowners to our neighborhood. Per the ordinance, and the reason we're even here today, the reason we're even able to sit in front of you and have this opportunity, because the ordinance is literally called hardship and fair rate of return increase. We are both losing money each month and not receiving a fair rate of return. So our question right back to you is, how are we going to fairly increase rent so that we're operating at a fair rate of return?
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and speak on behalf of the board that I do apologize if you felt disrespected by the discussion that happened last time. And I can assure you that we are taking this very seriously and we want to come to a solution that is, both good for you and also doesn't risk displacing our graduate student community. They're on a fixed income, just negotiated a decent raise, but not one that, allows for huge increases in their rents.
Can I just say something to that effect? I'm saying it now because I'm gonna say it before and we brought this to supplement that. I feel that we're using the term with the students. I think it's just one unit that has maybe one student in it. I don't think that that's a fair statement to say about all of our tenants that they're all students, because that's not the case. And additionally, that very same unit and people that we're referring to and tenants, we have an email exchange where they agreed that paying $19.54 total rent, they would be happy to sign that, and that would, based on their email, present them with the need to be displaced from their home. So with that into consideration, we do have that in a copy of that if you'd like.
Say that again,
see that.
so you have a tenant that's agreed to new terms to a lease?
So I'm sorry, prior to the, can you speak for me, please? 'Cause my
Sure.
words are gonna start
Yeah,
again.
I think what Janae's referring to is if along the lines of not wanting to
Extra
displace
copies.
any tenant, we are fully aligned with that. The tenants that are in question for that in writing agreed to an amount that they did believe was fair, and this was prior to the introduction and passing of the ordinance. So when we initially sent out lease agreements upon purchasing the property, we went back and forth and negotiated an amount that would be reasonable. We came to an agreement on that amount. We sent back updated lease agreements, and all of that took place to the introduction and the passing of the ordinance in December. That exchange is in writing. So Janae's sharing that as a response to the argument of displacement of those tenants.
Thank you for this, and I will amend my previous statement to include displacing our graduate students and working class.
Correct. And I want to go on record saying that Janae and I have zero intention of doing anything that would displace any of our
We're
tenants.
not trying to displace. I think, by the way, I think the question came up during the last hearing was whether you're looking just to get fair market rent, which is kind of tantamount to the question of whether you're looking to make a profit or whether there really is a hardship. I think my client has pretty much set forth the reasons why he believes that there is a substantial hardship in this instance, where he's not making any money, he's actually losing money each month.
Maybe
Go ahead, Jared.
this is an interesting, I didn't realize that you had written agreements with tenants before or after the rent control ordinance went in place. And how does that, that to me is very interesting, that tenants in writing and the landlord negotiated a new rent increase. And how does that take precedence over a rent control? I mean, I guess a tenant then can go back and say, oh no, I agreed to this, but now the town is telling me I don't have to pay this anymore. This is interesting. This is a written document, legal document that says, okay, I'm willing to pay $1,954.
Ed?
Well, this exchange was the end of 2022, right?
Correct, prior to the ordinance being introduced.
Prior to the ordinance. And what was in reliance upon this, was a lease offered?
Yes.
Was a lease signed?
No, there was a delay in signature. So I sent the updated agreement on December 2nd. And then there was back and forth in ensuring that the tenant was able to open the document and review it. They responded that they were able to open it and review it, I believe, on or about December 11th or 12th. I followed up on December 22nd after I didn't hear back. And then that at that time is when they informed us about the ordinance coming out.
Right, so
which is
boom,
about
our
what-
ordinance intervened.
Correct. Now,
Any written agreement? Okay. So
and the discussion began in November. We
Right.
went back and forth on the negotiation leading up to this. So I want to just be clear that the first time that we sent this agreement was more than 30 days. The first time that we had approached them about an increase and gone back and forth was more than 30 days.
Because we
Got it.
wanted to be fair and we didn't step in and say, this is the new rent that we're in, like, we had conversations about it. Garrett had phone calls with the tenants as well, just to make sure that it was something that they could afford. To which in this response, you know, they would be happy to sign that. That came with a back and forth conversation and negotiation on what was a fair rent.
This is the unit that's currently at 1,500. It's the lowest.
$1,504, it's not the lowest.
It's not the lowest.
Is 1,040.
Okay. And then another one of you said the least renovated unit has,
The-
19.
The unit that is identical, or near identical to the unit that we're discussing about the email is currently at 1626. However, that's family members. They're in attendance today. I'm sure they'd be willing to testify if they needed to. But they when they moved in, they knew that we were going to be coming before the board at this time. So out of respect for the process, we put them at 1626, but they are willing. I mean, I can't speak for them, but I believe they would be willing to testify that they knew a rent increase was coming beyond the minimum amount.
Jared, go ahead.
So I'm a landlord, but I'm also, he can attest that I was tough on him last time he was here, but I also see both sides of it. And I can see the landlord side here where he got a written, and I know, and you can tell me that email is a legal document. It's an agreement between two parties, and it says we agree to this monthly rent. It was prior to the rent ordinance. The rent ordinance didn't go into effect till 30 days. I know after something like this goes into effect, it's usually 30 days until a written document. They probably got, and I can't speak to the tenant, but it sounds like, at least with this, that this sets precedent over rent control. If whatever's agreed before rent control is put in place, at least for this particular email, when you agree to a rent with a tenant before any ordinance is put in place, wouldn't this wouldn't this be binding?
It's not a contract. I mean, it's.
Well, it
No,
is.
I think.
But I mean, it's not nothing, right? Written.
It's a contract.
I think, so legally, it's not a lease because nothing was signed before then. We understand that. So that's comment A. Comment B, however, is the board should be looking for, and I think the tenants and the landlords are looking for, what would be a fair and market rate rent for a reasonable return. So you could certainly give this agreement in December of 2022, which at that time, if we had no ordinance coming along, would have been accepted and probably followed up with a lease. You can give that weight in terms of trying to determine what should be a fair market rent for these units. Forget percentages right now, okay? We can back into the percentage. We can look at the 3.8 or whatever we normally allow, and you can build on that to get to a fair rent. But you could certainly consider this and give weight to the fact that the tenant who now occupies, this is a 215-2, right? And it's occupied by Michelle, and so, okay. So you can give weight to this exchange whereby the landlord and the tenant had an agreement, basically, if this is not rebutted, that this would be a fair rent for this particular property. All right, you can give weight to that, not legal agreement, but you could certainly consider that in terms of trying to find out what's a fair market rent for this unit.
A workaround, because he's not gonna like this, but I looked at his expenses, and while $6,600, $6,600 a month seems like a lot, it's in line what market expenses are for an apartment, to operate an apartment. Now, his rent, and so plus R&M, which can be zero, never really is, but could be $0 a month, or it could be $2,000 a month. So you don't really know, but his expense load is plus or minus what rental comparable. So I'm trying to look around and say, then if his expenses are plus or minus what it costs to operate an apartment, so then he has income here. Well, the income here, is that, is that, can we look at that, and do we have to look at it that as a, well, the income doesn't cover his costs? Well, there's a fixed amount that to operate apartments, not just in Highland Park and Addison, everywhere, plus or minus New Jersey, it costs about the same to operate. Taxes are a little bit variable, but roughly it's about the same. So I don't know particularly if, and this as a board, we have discussed if this is a hardship or there's a workaround where we can say, well, we have another lease that somebody was theoretically going to sign that brings them up another $300. He has under market rents. Obviously, the market has gone up significantly. These are, let's say they are under market. They're under market for two reasons. One, they're under market. Well, one large reason. One, they were under market. Two, I think he hasn't given anybody an increase in 2
Correct. And I
years,
want
correct?
to just add there, out of respect for this process, we did not increase 22 into 23 or 23 into 24.
Sure. So he has 2 years, and 2022 had what, a 5 or 6% increase?
Well, what was it? No, it was a 4 point something, right? What was the,
Yeah.
give me the living.
What is it? What were
But they
the-
didn't do that in that
No,
year.
no, but we should write down, because this is important. What was the percent increase of the board?
Like, had they done the maximum for,
It was 4 point,
2023 was 4.475.
and what was this year?
3.80.
4.475.
Okay, which totals
plus,
12.
what is this here again?
8.2% increase. So none of these rents have, and this tenants don't want to know it, but it's compounded. So it'd be,
Right.
I don't know what the compounding would be, but.
Times 1.4475 and then times.
8.5%. So all of these rents would be, the landlord hasn't recouped any of the rental increases and he's been held flat. So I don't know if we can sit here and say, oh, the woman that was here last time, she's paying 1040 and yes, it's $600, $700, $800 below rent, but she's legally in there. And just because the landlord has an expense structure that's $6,600 a month, which may seem high, but it's not out of the ballpark. Okay, so we have to look at different ways at tackling this rather than supposedly a hardship. I think that, and this is we'll go through a proposal, but I think that he came up with a document that said a tenant agreed to pre the rent control ordinance that the tenant was going to pay 9.54%, $9,554. And on top of that, that would have been the 4.48. That would have been a flat increase. Then a year later, now this tenant would have probably also got an increase of another 3.8%. So whatever that is, maybe.
2,288.
So for the $1,500 apartment, had they actually done the increase last year, it would be up this year to 1626.
No,
No,
2,000.
it would be the 1954 by the 3.8.
Well, no, I'm saying it for the $1,500, if we started there, I could
We
calculate
started
for all of
there,
them.
and
but-
then if we started there and then did the 3.8.
Well, the 4.475 and
We
then.
wouldn't, we would only increase one time per year.
$2,028, okay? And then, now, do you have any other documents that, with tenants that agreed to other rent increases?
No, because the other two tenants have turned over, and then, and
Okay.
with the other unit, we did.
What's the rent now, or that has the base
unit in
rent?
question,
Yeah,
1504.
Okay, so that's,
1504. So And that was their rent. That was their same rent. You said you had increased it in 2 years. That was their same rent 2 years ago.
I've kept it flat.
Starting there. So had you, not considering that agreement, had you like compounding that percentage increase from last year, had you increased it by the 4.475 and then also increased it again this year by the 3.8, you would be at 1626 and so I think I think that's a really good point,
No,
Jared.
but
We
I'm
should
even-
consider the
I
fact
would
that
go
they
even
did-
further. Because
Well, we can take that also
I want
and
to
then-
be fair to both the landlord and the tenant in this situation.
So what had they
Tenant
agreed to there?
Tenant agreed to this in,
Thank you.
and then an ordinance came in that, so in this particular case, this tenant theoretically would have paid 1950 all the way through 2023, and then gotten a rent increase of another 3.8% after the year end. So that rent would be right now, if a lease renewal would have gone to that tenant, be 2,000 and you said.
28.
2,119 would be what it, if you,
They did it calculated,
Yeah.
228. Okay, now, what you could do with the other ones is say, okay, which ones are brand new leases or within a year? Which ones?
The only one within a year would be this one that just moved in January 1st of this year.
1985. Okay, so that one just moved in when?
January
January
1st.
1st.
Okay, so that one is flat. Now, I would say everybody else gets an 8.2% increase right now, which is what you had held flat for 2 years, compounded by the annual compounding, because it's the 4 point, and that's my recommendation, and we can discuss it, but
so what is starting before we compound the 2%? You're saying we start with what so they had agreed in
they've been flat. They've been
2022.
flat. Everybody
Right.
except for one person,
So-
the new tenant has been flat for 2 years.
They had agreed to 1954 or whatever it was for the 2020 or 2023, sorry, right?
Correct.
Into that. So we wouldn't consider the 4.475 in that year, right? We wouldn't add
Just the.
on top of that, on
Just,
top.
just 2023, 2024.
Just the 3.8 increase in
Right.
We would
2024.
not be able to implement the 4.75.
Right.
Because it wasn't in, they had, or it was,
That was the agreement, yeah,
That was in
for
place
that,
of
for
the
that.
4.7.
period.
So- but then all the other leases except on all the other leases, let's give them.
The
benefit
4.475 plus
Plus
the,
the
4.3.8.
plus the 3.8, which is
and then
compounded.
compounded. So
And then that's, where does that get you, my friend?
Can we just real quick go through there's the four units and what the
Yeah.
starting cost is now?
I just want to point out something. We're specifically talking about unit 213-2, which is 1040. And if you're saying, okay, well, let's just give them the benefit of the 4.475 plus the 3.8%, we would have gotten that without asking for hardship.
Well, we can't apply it retroactively.
No, what I'm saying is to just say, okay, well, we'll give you the increase that you would have gotten under the rent leveling ordinance. That's not really.
But you didn't-
giving you a hardship.
But you can't apply it
You
retroactively.
Held flat for 2 years. You'll
Right.
never, you can't recoup that. So
Well,
we're
well-
now coming back to the table and saying, well, we'll give you that. We'll
Well,
let you raise the rents 10% on everybody.
It's a place to start the conversation, I think.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the hardship is just increasing it by that percentage doesn't really make up for the hardship.
The rent
But
for
I'm-
all four units.
You're offering us something that. we
But I'm
would have done.
arguing that-
Calculation,
that it's-
figure like.
I'm trying to come up, and I know you're thinking I'm not, I don't mean to be aggressive, or I don't mean to be adversarial. I'm trying to come up with something in the middle, and where I think I tried to make my argument earlier, which was that your expense load is not egregious.
Of course not.
So what that means is, if I look at your expenses on the property, they're ballpark what comparable expenses of everybody else
course.
in New Jersey. So how can you say you have a hardship when your expenses are, so it's like when I can look at this in anything. If this person is paying the same thing you are, why is yours a hardship and mine not?
Well, you're making a tautological argument though, because you're saying, well, your rent is lower than everyone else's in other towns, but you have the same expenses as everyone else, therefore you don't have a hardship.
But-
No.
But
Rent's
in-
lower.
And I know, but in fairness, and I know you hate when, you're gonna hate when I say this, when you buy a property, you have a rent roll and you know the laws about how to increase 10. This hardship wasn't in place, and this wasn't in place, neither was the rent ordinance when you could do this, but you kind of, you go in knowing how you can raise rents legally and fairly and what you can get. And so you know your expense structure. So, and you know your rents. So you know, you're going into this transaction with your eyes wide open. So I'm sitting here saying, as in a biased way, because I do this for a living, I know what I'm getting into. So I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I'm saying I would recommend, okay, you came to us, you would never have gotten this because this is now, you're coming to us for you're saying you have a hardship. Okay, well, you're gonna be able to get this tenant up. We're possibly, my recommendation is you go up $500 in this tenant retroactive, not retro, right now, okay? And then everybody else is getting a 10% pop. I can't help you with your 1040 tenant. I can give them maybe a 10% increase, but they're in there and they're in there until they move out or until they move out or don't pay the rent and you can evict them.
Isn't that the point, though, of the hardship hearing, is to say, well, we want more than what the rent leveling ordinance would have normally authorized? Because my client didn't go into this transaction eyes wide open. He went into this without a rent leveling ordinance in place, and surprised, once he got in there, he had a rent leveling ordinance. If it wasn't for rent leveling ordinance, I would have been able to go in front of Judge Corman and ask for what.
In fairness, and I'm not, I think I do this every day. I buy properties every day. I know what you guys did. You went in and you didn't give leases right away because you were waiting to give the pop. So you didn't want to lock in the original 3.8%. There was a method to it. And
I actually would respectfully disagree. We actually picked up the phone. We actually visited the apartments and sat down with tenants and spoke with them. Because they indicated and we spoke openly about how they knew a rent increase was going to come because there was no ordinance in place, right? So it's almost like trying to imagine a world before COVID, try to imagine a world here before an ordinance was even in existence. So of course they know, new landlords are coming in, my rent is probably going to go up. So we actually took the humane approach, went to their door, picked up the phone and said, hey, we want to come to an agreement that we believe is fair, and had conversations back and forth to get to that. So we did not delay anything with an intention of popping them or whatever.
Yeah, and to say that, oh, well, he didn't give the 3.8% increase because he wanted to give them bigger pop, but we didn't know that 3.8% increase because there was no 3.8% increase.
Right,
You're not giving us anything by saying that you're only giving us 10%.
okay, so
Can I hold on real quick? We have Pauline on stack, so can we,
Yeah.
and then I put myself on stack.
I'm hearing both conversations, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but as a tenant, Jared they just discussed the 10% plus the compounding. So as a tenant, if you go above that, what's gonna happen to the tenant? And I hear you with it's a hardship and whatever, but I think you have to figure out something, because the tenant cannot take all the brunt because your numbers are not matching.
Absolutely, and I think that's what we attempted to do and came to a conclusion to do in 2022.
So I want to add to this too. I put myself on stack after this. Jared brings up a good point. I think we also need to discuss with the board like how we're defining hardship here, because Jared's clearly, he's operationalizing this in a way that, if the expenses are there and you knew you were getting into it, it's not a hardship in the same way that like nobody expected COVID to happen, and we'd already agreed to everything, that the world was a certain way, and then something happened that was unforeseen to cause this. But I think, and you're making the argument that actually this hardship was caused by the plan that you had, the business plan that you had, did not imagine a world with this rent control ordinance in place, and the ordinance itself is actually causing this hardship. And I think we should consider that.
I appreciate that.
I believe if we were able to continue the conversations with the tenants and come to an agreement, I think this would have happened for all the units, and we would never be sitting here before.
And by the way, there's 625 municipalities in New Jersey. Only 100 of them have rent leveling ordinances. What do we do in the other 525 towns that we don't think about the tenant? We obviously think about the tenant, but we don't just say, okay, well, we can't increase the rent because of the tenant. At that point, if the landlord gives a rent increase, landlord can pick a percentage of rent increase, whatever rent increase the landlord wants to pick. And if the tenant doesn't want to pay it and the landlord brings the tenant to court for non-payment of the rent increase, the judge will determine if the rent increase being sought is unconscionable. We're not looking at a set percentage. So this is a very unique scenario that you have in these 100 municipalities that have rent leveling ordinances where it kind of, yes, it favors the tenant a lot more than the market approach would.
And I think we have to take into consideration the timing too. When you bought your property, it's not the same as those who had owned, were already either,
Established.
made this kind of investment after the ordinance was in place, or were already at some kind of equilibrium prior to the ordinance coming into. Go ahead, Diane.
Aside from defining a hardship, I think we need to define it's rent control. It's not rent leveling. Highland Park wanted to have rent control. That's a little different.
Yeah, I understand.
using these kind of
The
interchangeable
term rent
words.
leveling is very often used in place of rent control. I understand they're different words, but
I would add also defining fair rate of return, because the section 8 is titled not just hardship increase, but hardship and fair rate of return increase. So what does the board consider a fair rate of return?
And I think, but for that, I think we have to go back to Jared's point that I know it was found to be at least disrespectful, but we also don't want to create an incentive for the property prices to go up, because it's sort of like we're having to, I don't want to call it a bad investment, but like what this incentivizes then is for the property like
Absolutely. And it's
what
the
we're selling these for. It's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that this is above market rate, because you'll get that fair rate of return will adjust to that,
That's absolutely right. It's the other side too, right? Because if you have multiple cases that are on the other end, you're going to see less people want to purchase here. You're going to have a ton of
Right.
inventory.
I agree.
Nobody's going to want to buy. Value is going to go down, and taxes are going to go down. So it's like,
Can I be in the queue?
Oh, Jared, when you're up, it's up.
So this is, and I'm sorry that you guys happen to be the first. people that- and that's what the story is. It's like, what is a hardship? But, again, I'm doing this for a while and now I'm seeing, and you guys, so when you say precedent, it's interesting because what happens in 3, 6, 9 months, a year, 18 months, when everybody's mortgages are going to be refinanced and interest rates go up 2.5% or 3%. So everybody's new expense structure on a lot of multifamily properties and apartment rental landlords is going to be up 20-30%. Now, is that considered a hardship too? Because that was unforeseen circumstances by the federal government to raise rents so then that's going to kind of set a lot of homes and rents here. So theoretically, and this isn't on these guys, this is on what is considered a hardship. And that really is what we should define, because there's going to be an interest rate wave, and everybody knows there's a real estate sort of quasi softening, if you want to call it, or crash, or whatever the heck you want to call it, that's going to be coming because of financing and interest rates. So,
Right.
and so you could, these guys have a different situation because I didn't see their mortgage, but their mortgage is probably, they did it a couple of years ago and it's probably pretty low, and hopefully they've locked in for a long time. But there's going to be a lot of landlords that haven't. So what happens when other landlords come, when they used to have a $6,600 annual or monthly expense load, and now they have an $8,200, and they have some low rents that they were feeding along because they weren't going to evict a tenant that had been in there forever that was below market. But now that their expense load is up, oh, now I have some tenants that have been there a long time that are below market, and
Whose wages are sticky, by the way.
Right, well, who knows?
So
I mean,
it's
I'm not-
hard to adjust these to interest.
But one thing I learned from being a landlord with a lot of apartments, like I listen to a lot of stories about people. Everybody has a story, and you don't know whose story is, who's lying through their teeth and who's being honest. So you have to treat everybody.
We'll assume they're all being honest, right?
Yeah, well, you can't. Well, you can, but in the sense, so you have to treat everybody the same. And so we have to set a precedent. And so it's really define hardship. And if we define him these guys is having a hardship, then that's great. And then, but we have to be careful when we do it because it'll open the door to other circumstances. So even before we move forward with this and come up with, you know, ways to help these guys, which they obviously are losing money. I mean, they will eventually make money on this property the way, but right now they're losing money, obviously, and it's clear. And then you obviously don't know that R&M is always a variable expense and it can be very costly. So I'm very aware of that. However, they're going forward. What happens when the other two family landlords and the three family landlords come and their mortgage goes up?
Right.
And which it will. Yeah, I guarantee you, there's a whole new, look at any look at any news or any Wall Street Journal now that it says it. So is that considered a hardship? Because in their $6,600 here, that includes their mortgage payment. And there's going to be a lot of other landlords that are going to have significantly higher double mortgage payments of what they are now. And so what constitutes a hardship? Is it just do you include the mortgage? Do you break out all these costs and decide which is variable and which is not? So we have to decide what a hardship is and then determine how to handle what is going on here.
So we discussed last time that to adhere to the ordinance, that was actually, to Jared's point, like step one is that for eligibility for us to consider this, you know, or to consider allowing an increase of, you know, above the 3.8, that we first had to determine. We have to first define it and use that to determine the hardship. That's a necessary but not sufficient cause of what, you know, then once we've you know, step two, we can't decide what the increase would be until we've established that they have.
To be perfectly fair,
I think increasing in interest rates actually could constitute a hardship if it was unforeseen.
Ed's
So-
drafting the ordinance where he has a percentage. Doing this year in, year out. Sometimes I've had years where, like, I'll give you an example, Highland Park raised my taxes on, I have 4 properties and I raised my taxes on average 40% last year. I
I got one of the huge ones too.
I will break, if I'm lucky, if we're lucky this year, we'll break even or lose a little money. And then next year with our 3% increases, we'll crawl back above water. And we use reserves plus, because we've been doing this a while, so we kind of projected what it's going to cost. So next year, we're going to lose money in Highland Park. Okay. And then the year after that, we'll make a 2% return, maybe. And then it'll grow until the next assessment, or I have to change another boiler, or I have to spend $100,000 on roofs or whatever. And then I go back. So when you say there's a fixed return that is acceptable,
I think that is actually
it's-
zero. We established that you're still building equity even when
No, but-
sometimes
yeah,
it's
but-
level. I
But
mean,
who knows if you're building equity, because who knows what values are gonna be in 2 years, right?
Sure.
So I don't know if it's even fair to say, okay, a X% double-digit return is a target return to give people and then try to hit that, because there's too many variables, you know?
Right. I don't think we want to set like a rate of return that we now decide that that's going to be the standard, because then anybody that's less than that, even if it's just temporarily, then that's going to, then there's no point in having the rent control ordinance. We just say, here's your rate of return, everybody calculate your rents, you know, like.
And then you will, and honestly, and I'm not coming here with my properties in Highland Park and I'm not gonna ask for an appeal, but I think, and but I'm thinking about it on all sides and saying, well, if we look at this and we say, okay, he's not making any money, so we're gonna get him to his 12%. So that means this rent goes up this. What's gonna stop everybody else that's looking at this, or me, from getting my lawyer to come here and sit here?
That's why the
and go
hardship
through-
part is important, like determining the hardship in the sense that, like, it's not just like, you know, what are your
So it's
ledger or
kind
whatever,
of-
right? Your
it's-
costs and revenues.
then
It's
what-
really about them buying with a particular time, the timing of it, with a business plan that was then that was then disrupted by the passing of this ordinance, right?
Which for, in
And so
that,
that's not gonna be the case for every landlord that comes in here that like, that this is,
But then that's fair. And then that's fair. So I think you almost have to go back to something that I recommended, which is let them increase the rents that almost 10% on everybody. Like I even calculated it, like if everybody gets a 10% increase, the tenant that was agreed to this $2,000 almost rent plus next year's rent, that it's $1,000 a month, it's another $1,000 a month increase in income.
and that covers
that's
their,
a
at least
12
their cost.
And that's
like,
a $12,000 profit, and
Yep.
that covers, and that's my way to look at it, and that covers $1,000 of R&M if they have $1,000 one month and they don't another month, and they can, and then that gets them through this year, and then every year they can raise the rents more, somebody moves out and you can get it to market.
Can we look at that in dollar values, the rates that, or the four, maybe, the starting rent right now for the 4 properties and what Jared's proposal would get them to in
Well,
terms
I
of,
went through it, so the $1,600 apartment, would get a $136 increase.
so that goes up to what, 17? Okay, there,
I don't know,
So can we- Can
17.
we just double check we got the right rents? Because I have different numbers than you just said.
Yeah.
So do you want to just walk us through the
What were your
current
rents
rents?
again?
yeah, what are the 4 rents?
1626 for 213-1? Is it 16?
I'm sorry, what?
213-1, I think is 1626.
1626, all right,
You're right, so I'm-
213-2 is 1040,
Mhm.
1040,
and 215-1 is that's the one we already got the increase last year.
1950.
so that one's out, we don't need to consider that
And
one,
that's
Yeah.
1985?
That's 1985.
so that one's out.
If anything, you're gonna say 3.8 on top of that, but you know, leave
Well,
that
you
alone
can, you
because
can do that anyway.
they just did a lease, so I'm not gonna touch that one. 215-2 is 1504.
215-2 is what,
1504.
1504, so you want 10% first, and then you want the last year's increase and this year's increase? Are we giving
I thought it
10%?
was
No, no, no,
compounding last year, this year.
I want the compounded rent.
Okay, so
Yeah,
so
apply
just
the-
compounded last year and this
Apply
year,
for
so
the 4.475
4.475.
and then apply the 3.
Yeah, and by the way, am I correct in assuming
I got
that this rent leveling ordinance or rent control ordinance has the same increase amount, whether it's a net lease or a gross lease?
Right.
So the 3.8%, how did we arrive at that? What was the board's thinking and when that was calculated? Why is it 3.8? Is it?
It's the average between the Philadelphia and the New York
So
CPI.
that's- So CPI, but so CPI doesn't compensate the landlord for increased expenses. So if expenses are going up, that's not what CPI is for. If your expenses are staying exactly the same, CPI is
It's
compensating. you.
essentially to keep us up with inflation.
Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to
Yep.
compensate you for the loss of value of the dollar. So if it's a net lease, I understand giving a CPI increase. If it's a gross lease, you really need to give a little bit more than that. And I understand you're advocating for the tenants, but
What are you, but, and is it different where you're paying sewer, water?
Matt had.
Yes, they're paying-
Oh, sorry, Matt.
They pay heat and electric.
Sewer, they're paying sewer, water, they're paying taxes. These are all things that we've broken out if it was a net lease. And now you don't usually do that on a residential, but I'm just saying that the 3.8% is not really, you said you'll eventually be profitable. I don't know how it could eventually be profitable if they're getting the CPI only and they're not getting increased expenses.
That's the, I mean, that's an argument against like the way we determine, the 3.8 is argument determining how.
I may be so bold as to say, can we not like mine amendments to the ordinance right now? I think
Right.
with what we've got.
Oh, I'm not trying to make amendments to the ordinance. I'm just
If you want to
trying.
give us some feedback at a later date and, you know.
I'm just trying to, hear me out. I'm literally, I hear your story. I'm trying to generate you another $1,000 a month in rental increases to help you, because your expenses you knew, your rents you knew.
We didn't know the rest.
You haven't, there were below market rents. There are below market rents, but, I mean.
I understand. You've done everything you can to advocate for the tenants in this case, but on 213-2, I think going 1040 and going at 10% up is probably just, it's just not in line with what a tenant should be paying for that unit. I mean, I have pictures of the 213-2. It's a pretty good unit. We're just gonna look at 213-2 right now. This is, you got the
Yeah, well,
Pergo
we have
floors,
to.
or is it hardwood or Pergo? I mean, this is like another unit. You saw the comparable rents that we submitted. They're all going for 2,000 plus.
And I will add for that, but for that unit, that is a single tenant living by herself. And I think living by herself is nowadays, I think, in my opinion, considered a luxury, and that comes at a cost typically, and one of which, frankly, she's not paying. So it feels like we're like being taken advantage of here, especially in that case. And it's
All right,
not.
that's the only one that I have a major concern with.
Can we go back to Matt? I think was on stack.
I'm sorry, I was just, I'm just getting a little caught up here, not having read the last meeting, but can we just, can you remind me the two properties, how many bedrooms there are?
Sure, each unit is 2-bed, 1-bath. I brought the original listing to validate that if needed. So 2-bedroom, 1-bath, the layouts are identical. The property is connected, so it's one house split left and right, so the only difference is mirroring each other. A 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and then you need the rent amounts again?
No.
What was the increase that you got, or the dollar amount for the increase you got for the one property that you've already come to an agreement on? Because we do what, so I just,
The one that just changed?
yeah,
It was previously renting all of last year for 1880.
1880, and then it went up
It's a
to
new tenant. The tenant changed and
Yeah.
we re-rented it for 1985.
1985. Okay, so and that, so that's covering, so that for $400 and something deficit that you're running every month right now, that's covering part of that, right? Or is that
No,
considered that?
I've
We already added that up.
That's already considered that. Okay, so what if we give you retroactively what Jared's suggestion, the 4.475 and the 3.8 compounded, that only brings you up about $351. It brings the properties up to 1763, 1127, and 1631.
But
So
then you have this one.
right, so what do we do? What explain then what exactly we're doing? This is the,
Honor the terms of what they would.
so we want to honor that and give them the three. I mean, they can do the 3.8.
Well, we honor they don't get to retroactively get.
The 4.475, but the 3.8,
No,
yes.
no, they don't get the lost,
The historical
the
payment.
historical payments on it.
No, I mean, we're not gonna give, because
They're
had they
gonna
actually put this in place, they wouldn't have done the 4.475.
They'll give them, if they give them they would have signed this in, I guess, December or January of 2023.
22.
22, 423,
January
yeah.
21. January of 23, December of 22.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, and when is the increase, so it wouldn't have
They're
gotten.
effective in January.
So they have them sign a new lease for the 1954 plus this
3.8.
3.8% increase.
But the rest of them, I gave the 4.7, the 4.475 backward, you know,
So I
but we're
did
not
run-
for that one.
I did run them if you want me to run through it.
1954 times 3.8%.
Can we, Terry's on stack, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'll just, and someone feel free to correct me if their numbers came out differently, but so for 213-1, which is at 1626. Would you do both 4.4 and 3.8? Oh, wait, is that the
Coming
new
to
one?
1763, right?
Is that the new one? I'm sorry, now I've already confused myself.
Well, yeah, which one did you raise up to the,
Yeah.
Whatever, help if I went through it again with everyone.
yeah, please,
You start from
each
there.
property.
Sure. 213-1
Uh-huh,
is currently rented for 1626.
okay.
And
And has had no.
and has had
increase.
no
Okay,
increase.
that's, I think I have it now, but
Okay,
so,
Do you want to?
I'm happy to continue. I just don't want to.
no, I was
So-
just
oh, this
confused.
one's up
If you want to
19.
finish, go ahead.
Let's put this one at 19.
Okay, yeah. So then 213-2
Mhm,
is currently rented at 1040
mhm.
with no increase in either going into 23 or going into 24.
Right.
215-1, since the introduction and passing of the ordinance has changed tenancy twice. The first time and the last time that we met, it was being rented at 1880 and is now currently rented at 1985
With a new tenant.
with a new
And
tenant.
you're fine with that,
And they are fine
Yes.
with that.
We're fine with that.
New tenants, yep.
fine.
And we're fine with, and we believe that for the condition of that unit, which is the least renovated unit,
Who's this one?
that'll be the last one.
Okay.
The condition of the unit that is at 1985, we believe is fair market value because that was our asking price.
Okay.
And there was no
215-2.
negotiation. 215-2 is currently at 1504 and is the one that.
And they had agreed to the 1985 on that one too.
Agreed to the 1954.
54, yeah.
In December of 22 with no increase the following.
Had they, oh, for the 1985 one, I did that for, sorry, because that's not considering,
So had we,
1954.
had we put the 1954.
They'd be up at 2028. I mean, if had they signed that at the time, you could actually increase it this year to 2028, which would be a big difference, right? And I think, if we think these are comparable units and you've already gotten the one to agree to that rate, and the fact that they had agreed to something that was actually, they would be paying much more had they signed that at the time. I think leveling that one out to 1985 with the other one would be reasonable, like at this point. So it's not the full 3.8, it's not the full 3.8 increase, but it's.
HPA, I think it's important to have a method rather than the problem I have with just saying, oh, this is your story.
Well, it's not arbitrary.
No, but having, oh, you get, the story is like, they have a tenant that is paying 1040 and then she told us that, oh, she's a single person there. She should, I think it's important for us not to look at the color behind it as much as look at it as a method. Okay, we know they're operating at a loss. We know that. Okay, let's look at a method that we can stand behind to make sense to us. What's reasonable to not cram the tenants and help the landlord at the same time, and not do it like, that's why I know I'm biased to
So
my own
Jerry, if we
method.
do this the way that you proposed, which I did for the first two, the 213-1 and 213-2, I just did the compounded
Right.
thing. That brings about to 1763 and 1127. The 1985, they've already taken care of for 215-1, and for 215-2, like, it's not arbitrary to also set them at 1985, but I think that one that one they had agreed beforehand that they were gonna.
They have an
1954,
agreement, so then
And they could be paying, I mean, if we actually make them, put it up to that amount plus the 3.8, it would be 2028 is what we would be.
right,
rated
that's what they
to.
said. Yeah, what did you guys say? 2028. So, and that to me,
That's a huge increase, though, nominally, and that's where it comes back to the tenants. Like, that's a lot to handle.
But in fairness
They
to
did
the
agree to it.
landlord, and then they haven't paid a rent increase in the last 2 years, when everyone that's a renter and everyone that is a homeowner and everyone that lives in New Jersey and in the country has paid 10, 15, 20% increases on everything they own across the board of their expenses. And these tenants haven't had a rent increase. So I have to look at it from a landlord and a tenant standpoint. So there's got to be a fair, equitable way to do this. And I think it's pretty rational. They never gave them an increase. So they get an increase. And this person had agreed to a rent that our ordinance came in and kiboshed and kiboshed, but.
So if the question is on that last one, we could put it up to 1985, which is more than what they would have paid last year, but it's what it's at least setting at the same level that the other unit, the 215-1 would be at. Or we could, for that last unit, alternatively, give them that plus the 3.8.
Agreement, yeah.
And so if we give them that plus the 3.8, that again is $2,000 and 28.
228.
228 or
Yeah,
2028.
they're large increases, but they're where they would have been anyway.
Well, and that person, the
Right.
fact that they've agreed to this, we have concern for the tenants, but the fact that they agreed to this means that this was the cost they were able to handle.
The cons aren't
Yeah.
overly happy with
Right.
this, but the tenants would have been here anyway. And the tenants would have been here anyway, and this at least puts the landlord above water slightly. Am I looking at this right though? You're all in with insurance, escrow, everything, you're paying 6,400 a month?
It's actually closer to 65, yeah, 64, 83, 19.
So
Yeah, I
in
think
theory,
that's
you're saying your monthly nut is 6,600?
If you're only adding to this 6483, my
But
average.
there's
my-
significantly more expenses.
I'm only adding to that 66 I shared in
That's
my
at the
opening is
base.
only my PSE&G bill and my water sewer bill. I'm not talking about any of the other repairs.
Or I mean, I don't know, there's annual Highland Park
Right.
Inspection.
registration,
that's
inspection
included.
fees and all that stuff that are here. There's thousands of dollars of fees.
We've
So,
fixed sinks and bathtubs and drains and.
well, that's our.
I have a proposal. I want to see, because just working from what we've discussed and that considering that one unit, what they had agreed to already, plus the compounding on the others and the one that you already have a agreement with. Can I propose the numbers to you and see if this is something that is acceptable and will cover, at least get you out of the red, right?
Well, are we gonna hear from the tenants?
Yeah, well, I know, I mean, yeah.
It's on the agenda. We're not, no decisions till public comments.
I'm gonna ask them to approve it, like this, we have, as a talking point, I mean,
Oh,
we
no, no,
proposed
I was
something
just-
earlier and he said that would be completely
I was telling
unacceptable.
Diane that. I
Oh,
was trying to stop you.
So yes, we do need to hear from the tenants still, and we are, but if, based on, if we follow everything that Jared proposed, plus, you know, let's do this part of it, it'd be 1763 for 213-1, 11,
Do we get the percentage? of
I'll
the
have to
increase?
calculate that in reverse, but yeah. So 213-1 would go from 1626 to 1763. That's just with the compounded increases. 213-2 would go from 1040 to 1127. I mean, it's gonna be 4.475, Diane, plus 3.8, but compounded, not just added. 215-1 is at 1985, you've agreed to that one, and 215-2 would go up to 2028, which would be, had they signed it on what they had agreed to, and then also you get the 3.8 for this year. That's what, in terms of like nominal values, what that looks like if we, with the plan that Jared's proposed here.
By the way, it's not 9.4%, 9.04% is with the compounding. That's the way it works out. The only, I'm okay with all those numbers except for obviously 213-2. I think with the only given 3.8% increase or the 9% increase, it's essentially going to leave the rents low into perpetuity because next year there's going to be another, let's say 4%, whatever the number is. You're never going to be able to catch up.
And,
Right.
No matter what, it's always going
And
to be low.
percentage increases always make things more unequal, not. Yep.
and there's also, and hear me out, I'm Garrett, your name is
Yeah,
Garrett?
yeah.
Here's a good point where, so and this is something the rent control board should take into consideration. He has a tenant that pays probably 50% below market, right? Theoretically, plus or minus. I don't know, let's say, right, that 1040, maybe it's a $1,900 unit, maybe it's more, it doesn't matter. It's plus or minus $1,900, $1,800, $2,000. Okay, so there's what he could do as a landlord which he, I don't know, he was picking up I don't know what your mindset was, but an aggressive landlord and would have looked at this rent and immediately sent the tenant a lease for $1,800, $1,900. The tenant would have argued it. The tenant would have then taken them to court, and then a judge would have negotiated what that, and you're a judge. I don't know. I have no idea if a judge would have said, nope, you're stuck with it, Garrett. Or a judge would have said, yeah, you're paying 1040. It depends on the day, depends on the judge. I don't know, right? But so I don't know how to approach, because
What you're saying is actually a harsher version of what we did. We actually, instead of coming in aggressive and saying, hey, to Lori, we're going to go 18 or 1900, I picked up the phone. Lori and I had multiple conversations where we went back and forth. She shared her concern, which is that is a significant increase. I said, okay, well, let's go back and forth and let's talk about it together. Like, we actually took what we believe to be a very humane and respectful approach.
Right.
And we weren't looking to hike her up $1,000.
No, and you
Right.
were, dude, I get it. You're they may not like you, but at first, coming from a landlord, you're I used to be like that, and then I
And then you realize you can come in aggressive.
No, but I can't. You can't.
Put that in the
The problem
minutes.
is you can't,
They're
you have
all
you have to treat everybody the same, and you're gonna get into
All
trouble
that
if you
is
don't,
said.
because
We see that here.
They're
yeah,
all-
everybody
Say
has,
no
you have
more.
to treat every tenant the same, because if you don't, you can get in trouble. You can get legally in trouble for
All right.
purposes.
All right, we're gonna
But
treat
no,
everyone the same, we'll
but
make them
here-
all 1985.
Yeah.
No. But so
Let
so
them say
what
Yeah.
I'm telling the board is their big concern is the 1040, which I understand because there's a lot of untapped income there. However, I don't know what to do because if there wasn't rent control, if it hadn't been there, maybe he would have maybe he would have gotten that up. Maybe the tenant would have fought him in court. We don't know. But with the when we put the rent control board ordinance in, it fixed it and made it permanent, so he could not
Permanent that it was under market, which it,
under market
yeah.
and fixed it. So I don't know how to rule on a 1040. It would have been discussed by a judge. And it would have gone back and forth unless he had pre-negotiated or he had settled before it went to court with the judge.
So before we have the discussion, I think we also want to hear from we have to give an opportunity for the tenants to speak again. Diane, though,
Yeah, I
first you were
just
on
have
staff.
one question. Was this the least improved apartment?
The 1040.
The least improved unit,
Is the 1985.
which I will obviously allow you guys to make that determination based on the photos, but I think what we would all agree is the least improved unit is renting for 1985, which is the most right now.
And on those packets, the 1040 is 213-2, and I put the apartment numbers in the top right
Yeah,
corner.
can we see 213-2?
And
Oh, yeah,
213 is a two-bedroom as
I have
well.
extra sets if you need them.
And
But
that's
with French doors
currently
on one of the
1040.
apartments, right?
They
Two by the
all,
room.
they all have.
So-
Yeah.
Keep flipping past that CO.
So yes, kind of two bedroom. What was the?
But what I think this what our hearings are becoming, which actually makes more sense to me, is landlords that were impacted based on our ordinance that went
Maybe you
into
want to take off.
place at a particular time,
Well, this is the one that has
right?
the
Isn't
unit
that
over
fair?
it, yeah.
That's what we're talking about now, because if he would have bought this a year earlier or a year later, he would have already had visibility and taken action on his rents. And if he would have bought it a year later, he would have taken action on his rents, and he would have known where he was going and how high. So he bought it 3 months later, 2 months later, the rent ordinance got put in place, and his raised to market, all his rents got stopped. And so that's what his hardship is. So it is fair, and I think our adjustments are fair. I just don't know how to treat the 1040 because
It's like,
I don't know what a judge would
it's
do.
got an extra, it's got a diagram.
I have a pretty good idea what the judge would do. The judge is gonna look at 5 factors, and the judge is the big one is gonna be market rent, but obviously, does the increase shock the conscionability of the court? What are the other factors? I mean, there's the relative bargaining positions of the parties. There's 5 factors that the court's gonna look at. And then the judge is gonna make a determination as to whether the rent increase being sought is unconscionable or not. Does anyone else need a set of these exhibits? Set of the photos for 232? Okay. I made extras, so just in case.
Okay, any other questions for the landlord so that we give an opportunity to hear from the tenants before we start our
Thank you all.
deliberations that have sort of already started?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any last,
No, I guess I just want to, I guess I'll close out to Jared's comment just by saying that our hope would not for it to have gone to court. I firmly believe with how well the conversations were going prior to the end of December, we would have come to an agreement. It probably wouldn't have been $1,900 because that, at that
For
time.
the 1,040.
For the 1,040, we probably would have gone back and forth and we would have settled somewhere, just like we did with the unit at 1954.
And then even after the ordinance, or when we found out about the ordinance, Garrett did speak to Lori and said, like, if $1,900 is too much, what is fair? Like, what can you do? When it's like, you
Did
know.
they have a
we're in
proposal for that at that time?
Do you
I
remember?
don't remember if we discussed it over the phone or an email, and I'm happy to go back and
We
check.
could check.
But some of the conversations were over the phone, just or face to face.
I mean, seeing the pictures, I do agree that, I mean, that unit does look nicer than the
And
others.
The unit in
Um,
1985
and-
is the least.
But go ahead, Diane.
What did you agree? What were you thinking?
Honestly, I don't remember what the exact figures were.
But what would you
but
propose if like you were like,
I mean, the right thing to do as a landlord is go in and put whatever we think market rent was. I mean, now we're talking over a year ago. I don't know what would have been fair. We would have ultimately negotiated to some sort of middle ground, just like we did. The way it would have gone similar to how it did with Nick and Michelle, which is I presented a number. They said we believe that's high. We both
Okay,
shared
what about
we
this?
both shared comps with each other, and we came to an agreement.
You negotiated.
And we negotiated, just like, you know, that, yeah.
But you don't have a number.
we didn't have a number.
No, I don't think we ever came to an exact number with Lori's unit. But I don't want to misspeak, but I don't think.
But then, so then this goes back to you guys when you created the ordinance. In the spirit of the ordinance, there are probably a significant number of tenants in town that pay significant below market. And is this.
The ordinance is to resist the market because the market's pushing to high profit.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So was this, with the spirit of the ordinance, it wasn't to protect the significantly, was it to help everybody, even the significantly below market
Uh-huh.
rents? And that I guess could be a discussion too, where, you know, like if you're paying 1040, does your, regardless, obviously it's a hardship for, you know, they're used to paying 1040, so, but.
So you're
is,
locked into a deficit for
a
infinitely.
3.8% increase, a $30 increase, you're never leaving unless you move somewhere else, right? I wouldn't.
I would never leave with that.
So did the spirit of our rent control, was it here to also protect people that have these significantly low rents, or I don't know, should there be something like where, you know, they get a 15% or 20% increase every year to gradually kind of, you know, I don't know. There has to be
I think
some
it's a
open
question,
discussion as to,
The more affordable housing.
or maybe, I don't know, because
That's
the landlords have a fair point that the very below market rents are protected by this rent control ordinance now.
I don't think that this, I mean, and I agree here with this because well, on one hand, I mean, you're not part of an affordable housing program. You're not getting a subsidy for this. And we should have more of that in general everywhere, more affordable housing available for people that can't afford, you know, for those that cannot afford the market rents, right? I think the ordinance was not necessarily to do that, to sort of implement an affordable housing. I mean, keep it affordable, yes, but not to do what you're saying, which is to sort of lock in landlords at below market and an infinite deficit when they're renting properties. They've been renting properties significantly, not just below market, but below it's below what their costs are, right? So I think that's important to take in. I think the ordinance is more to protect against the market rates outpacing wages by, you know, a percentage that eventually just puts the whole working class out of housing. So I don't think it was to keep units that were already being rented at well below what they should have been to keep them there. Lucinda, go ahead.
But I was just gonna say the market rates that we're talking about, they assume, you know, someone's making $90,000-$100,000.
Right.
If we're using.
Well, they don't.
if we
They
use
don't do
30%,
any assumption on it, but yeah, I mean,
30% rule of thumb, then that's what we're assuming.
They're also, and I know Jared said he had lots of units, but I think that there's probably a risk pool in there where you have some of the units might not make money and might lose money, but you got to keep putting yourself in my client's position. They only have these 4 units. They're not career landlords.
and we do want to take it. We said last time we do want to take that into consideration. It's not the same as when you're able to withstand minor shocks like a new boiler in one when you have 100 units, you can,
Well,
you can run it a
And we know
lower
shops
profit
like
margin.
that will come. We
Yeah,
understand that that's
the-
nature of the
the-
business, but to start off at a severe, in my opinion, like
I can tell
number
you
is hard.
from my experience, because I started out doing 2 and 4 families in New Brunswick. And what I can tell you is the volatility of expenses and income on them is huge. One person moves out for 2 months or a month, there's no income that month, and there's a loss. So that's what I was trying to tell Ed with, you really can't put a target return on them. The volatile, you're gonna make 2 months, you're gonna lose money, 2 months, you'll make money, and then you gotta do a roof, and then you gotta renovate a unit, and you don't, the money on the 2 and 4 is in the residual value. It's not on, there's not a steady income from these units. That's
Sure, and
just-
we understand that, which is why we didn't even include that in the 66 number I gave you. That's before I even talk about a new roof in 10 years or a boiler.
But if we stay at the rate that we're at now, or even like 3% raise on top of that, think about when those things do happen, then we're not even.
I think
at a
that's part of the
phase-
hardship determination is they
Yeah.
can't pull risk in the same way that somebody who owns 100 units can
I
do.
think,
Like,
I have my own arguments against that. Like, I started there and I didn't.
big business is better than small business.
Like, no, it has nothing to do with small business, big. It has to do with that, like.
Yep, I think so
there you
too.
go,
And by the way, you brought up vacancy and credit loss. I didn't factor that into the landlord's overall income picture, but in a way, that wouldn't be the worst thing if you did have a vacancy, because then you could increase the rent, but.
Okay, before, so as Pauline's calling for this, I think this is right. I think we want to give, in the interest of time and everything, I think we've gotten, unless you have anything else to say, most of the info we need from you. And I think we'd like to give an opportunity to hear from, for the board to hear from
Thank you.
the tenants again, and for them to share whatever they like.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna pass the gavel to Lucinda, the vice chair, while I run to the restroom real quick. Oh, those are all cleared. Oh,
You want us to just take a 2-minute recess?
yeah, actually, can we do a 2-minute recess in between?
Buy
Take a break, stretch.
Have a seat.
My text, I may join.
And is that, I think that is actually the best way for the hardship for people to come in, is that it was the direct hardship associated with the fact that the rent control went in at a certain time.
This is a unique
Right.
situation.
Whereas, again, if it would have happened 18 months earlier, they may not, and
Right.
they may not have bought the property, or if it happened 18 months later, they may not have bought the property. So I think that's the way we should look at all of these, and that is really the hardship, and it's not, you know, it shouldn't be everybody's sob story, a landlord's sob story, because.
This case won't make a precedent for any other, because this is the one that came in when everything was in flux. And unfortunately, there's a small, our landlord tenant law didn't used to reach down this far to 4 units. It was only the bigger projects, the garden apartments. And the council
I know who you
thought
are. I'm Heather
that
Pierce.
it
I'm
shouldn't
gonna-
cover
I
everyone
actually-
to try
I
to
saw
get
you,
protection.
I do
And so it was a new thought, a new idea to go down and to let everybody get fair returns and tenants get protected.
Watching the end with my
And
executive
this
director,
one
I'm like,
kind of got
I sent a
caught
picture to Ralph Scott.
in between.
I think
I mean,
why
that's
I-
really what happened.
I'm just.
So I wouldn't worry about
I just-
precedent. I think just work this one out. And hopefully with a way that the tenants can live with it and the landlord can, and move on.
Part of my, Ralph Scott, like, he's one part of my senate, on the university senate, so the board of congress together in Callaway, so that's our. Yeah. We need to do things, I think for the next hearing, we're gonna need to limit our deliberations. We need questions over at the people there, limited to questions, and then do our. Problematic. Starting a conversation. Before.
I think, Terry, after this, is there anyone else in the queue after this hearing?
I have nothing on the books, no. Nobody's approached me and submitted any. The record has 3 people watching at home.
And not discuss.
A quick comment. We'll call us back to order. I think next time we do this, we're learning. I think we'll make sure that we're limiting our deliberations to after. So we do the questions with everybody and then deliberate afterwards. I fear that we're getting into the discussion and working it out, which is what Pauline was trying to say, before we've had the whole picture. And I think it's important that, and I will be careful to do that next time. So I'm sorry to you that we started sort of our deliberations before we heard from you, but we will take into account everything that you have to say today.
Maybe you could reintroduce yourself to the board.
Sure. I'm Michelle Irving. I'm in the 215-2 unit. This is, yeah.
Nick Shaka-Levy, also in 215-2.
I'm Lori Sobel. I'm the one tenant in 213-2.
You guys share.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm also a tenant. I'm in 213-1.
Oh, good. And your name?
Michael Wolf.
Michael Wolf.
Are
Okay,
you the
thank you.
family member? Are you
What's
the
that?
family member?
I'm a family friend.
Oh, I thought they.
Oh.
they tell
Yeah,
us
I'm the
that-
family, we're married.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
I see.
Yeah, so we're.
Should we take his testimony separate?
I'm sorry, Mike, what unit are you in?
213-1.
Thank you.
Sorry, I need to grab some water.
Should we take, since he's in a different unit, or is he in the, should we do them separate?
No.
Because they
Didn't
kind
you
of
just
presented
move
as a
in?
group last time.
No.
No, you've
I've
been
been
there.
Versus the
for
new
over a year.
person.
Well, we'll listen to him after.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Because his partner's the same. Yeah. No, I just meant let these guys go. And, yeah. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Right, I'm back. I think maybe open it up the same way we did for the landlords, which is there, is there anything, we'll give you the floor first to add anything that you want to add?
They've been listening.
Yep.
Yeah, we would like to speak to our unit, which has been a discussion tonight. I'd also, just before we get into that, I appreciate everyone's time. We came here in November and we're prepared to resolve this. We're here again. We are both academics. It is very challenging. He had to give up going to speak in order to be here, which is, difficult for our career. I also just want to say that comments of saying that tenants are exploiting the system earlier this evening, and also saying that being a single tenant is a luxury, is also harmful and disrespectful. This isn't a situation, it doesn't matter regardless how we feel about one another. Landlords are trying to protect their interests as tenants. We are also trying to protect, keep a roof over our heads, protect our interests. And I just want to recognize there is a power difference. So as much as possible, I think it would be helpful to sort of remove these comments. So I think you'll speak to the situation.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to the context behind 215-2 and the kind of email exchange that we had in December 2022. So it is true, we did have this email exchange and we had negotiated in good faith. We had been communicating with Garrett and very respectfully, appreciated kind of his approach to that. But the context was, so I think Garrett and Janae took possession in August of 2022. And ever since that time, like pretty much right away, we had been in touch to try to get a 1-year renewal lease because our lease had come up, had ended kind of, so we had a notice to quit basically in August 2022. And we were put on a month to month. That was not our decision. We would have liked to have had a lease that kind of coincided with academic calendars.
And we did ask for that.
We did ask for that. And it took a couple months, which, okay, fair enough. Maybe there's, stuff to get in place. But the upshot of that is basically by the time that the landlords that approached us with this, it was pretty much at the worst possible time for us. I was defending my thesis like the week after we got this. And then we're both Canadian, so we had both already made plans to go back home for the holidays. So we literally had 3 days by the time we got that lease to scope out any other options that we, if we hadn't agreed to it, and because it's a 30-day period, right? Where when you're offered it, you have to say yes or no. I literally, like the weekend before I defended my thesis, we went down to Plainsboro to check out other options because we thought that what was being discussed was really going to strain our finances. Ultimately, like we didn't have time to really find another option. So that's why, in fact, we had agreed to, I think it was like a 6-month lease we had looked at. We said, given the constraints that we have, like I have to defend my thesis, we have to go home. That's the best we could do for 6 months. And then honestly, we were going to look at a place in Plainsboro or elsewhere, which meant Michelle had to commute up to Rutgers every day because like there was no other place that we could afford. And so I think this is exactly getting at the situation of like what the rent control is hopefully trying to prevent, right? Is kind of a displacement of working class and student tenants. As they mentioned, I have since graduated, but I still remain a postdoc, and I can happily share my finances. They're not that much better than a student. And being paid $63,000 pre-tax. Actually, I'm employed by Boston University because that's the one job I could find. So I have to go up to Boston once a month, which is an extra $1,000 at least every year or every month that I have to pay. So I'm pretty much making the same that I was making as a student, if you account for that. And if what the board is had been discussing, if we are paying 1954 or above like that, for sure will strain our finances. And I'm not sure how we would make ends meet with that. We had also, like throughout the last year, we had approached Garrett and Janae proactively to try to come up with a lease because we had been on month to month the whole time. And we would have happily, discussed our situation. Like we're both academics. Michelle will hopefully finish this year. So we're not here for the long term. Like they have an opportunity once we leave to get that market rent they're looking for. And I'm sure they'll be quite successful at that. But, it would be very disruptive for us if, we kind of have that 30% or more increase in the last few months while we're trying to finish up. Michelle's trying to finish up her PhD. So I want to put that out there.
Yeah, additionally, that's like in an email. We were also working with Rutgers Legal Services because obviously we could not afford to obtain a lawyer throughout it. So we were able to consult, and she had indicated that unless a lease is signed, we could have a conversation, like we shouldn't be concerned. We knew, we were informed at one point that this ordinance was going in. We were heading home. If we had to exit January 1st, no one could move our, like we were not there. There was no way we could return. So from our understanding legally, from the services we could provide, they said that sort of exchange is fine as long as the lease was not signed. We weren't 100% sure that the ordinance was going to go through, so we waited to ensure it was. Otherwise, like, well, I don't know what we would have done. We were in another country, so that would have been really challenging for us to find a new place, store our things until returned, etc.
Maybe I can speak on top of just that particular case, just in general, to kind of the new material that we got over the past week. So maybe just one more, just like a procedural point or maybe suggestion for future is that I think at the last board meeting we had with the board verbally agreed to hopefully have any new material that we could review for 2 weeks. And we had followed up a couple weeks ago and we only got the material a week ago.
I will admit, I think I was slow to send it to you.
No worries.
You get it to us in that time frame.
Which is fair. And I know the board is busy, but it's just like it puts us in a tough spot, right? Because we are trying to consult, the legal representation we have through Rutgers, and that doesn't give us much time to really prepare a response. So I just wanted to mention, hopefully in the future, there can be more time for tenants to kind of review any new material. We tried to do the best we could with the material that was presented. There isn't more information now on the cost that landlords are bearing. we didn't find any, unless we didn't get everything, we didn't find a new application or a new like cash flow analysis. So again, a lot of the same points we brought forward last time about the rent that they could have made the last 2 years, just following the allowed rent increase, the income they're getting presumably from the laundry, because we're paying a lot there just in terms of weekly costs. Like none of that is factored in. And so we would appreciate having like some sort of like clear cash flow analysis that shows exactly not just their costs, but also what are they making and factoring what they could have made already with the rent control, allowable rent control increase. Again, we had asked multiple times to be put on that kind of 1 year lease with the rent control increase. So if they decided not to do it, that's fair, but you know, that was an opportunity they had without having to go through the auction process. There's also a few things in the cost. Again, there's no amortization of inspection fee like we had asked last time. There's a lot of new expenses that we think are still one-time costs. So those are things that we would like, to review if we were to look at exactly what the cash flow looks like. And then the last point I wanted to bring up, I think you guys had discussed it a little bit earlier, but yeah, the role of what's the role of mortgage payments in the hardship? If I think from what I saw from the statement they provided, they're paying 6% interest rates. So if somebody purchases a house at 6% interest rates, and then a year later somebody purchases it at 3%, and they're similar properties, like does that mean that one is a hardship and one is not? And that the tenants that happen to live in the house that was purchased at 6% have to pay a much higher rent increase than the ones that happen to be in the house that was purchased at 3% mortgage or interest rate. So again, we would just like some clarity in terms of like what should be considered a hardship and what is part of kind of a business plan. And again, I think the discussion around market rate and business plan is different from the discussion around rent control.
Thank you again for your time. I would, just kind of add a little bit more. I guess you all received photos of the apartments. So as you can see, like two of the units are renovated or updated, two are not. I'm the tenant, one person, and my unit is not one of the renovated ones. Thank you for saying it looks nice. I think a lot of that's because I painted, tried to make it look nice, but it's it's not updated. They did like fix a bathroom sink, or so that would be like I guess the upgrade was a bathroom sink. But in the time I've been there hasn't been like renovations or anything. So the hardship application, and of course we don't want them to be operating at a hardship, but in my case it's asking for nearly a 50% increase, and as one tenant, that's not possible for one person to make. I wish I had an extra 50% a month to give them, but I don't. So I just kind of stress that. And again, when we speak about comps, I believe they submitted some comps of other units. A lot of them appeared to be like more luxury or high-end apartments in the area. So we looked around a little bit at smaller like mom and pop units that were going up for rent on like Facebook Marketplace and things like that. And we did find some that were going for like as low as 1,100, 1,200 in New Brunswick, Edison, Somerset. And I think we have some photos if you wanted, but just for clarity, like it's not completely unreasonable what I'm paying, because it does exist.
I think you gotta be careful with going to different towns,
Right.
because rent in particular towns is sometimes a function of the schools. So people will pay more rent if their child wants to go and benefit from the services of that town. So I don't know if Edison or New Brunswick is. That's all. Just that.
So obviously Highland Park is the best place to live.
These are,
Yeah, please pass the photos around. Thank you for those. Lori, did you have more? Sorry.
no, that was really it. I think they covered it.
And maybe just one other thing in terms of like, if the comparables are kind of a relevant point in this discussion is, again, just to emphasize that, there's a lot of amenities and a lot of the requirements that Garrett and Janae submitted that we don't have, even in the renovated units. So we don't have any fan above our stove. We don't have any fan like in the bathroom. French doors don't close. Technically, what I think they're claiming is the second bedroom in our original lease. Yeah. Or like vents, sorry, that's yeah. what they're claiming as kind of the second bedroom, like in our lease is not, our lease is listed as 1 bedroom, one kind of living room, and then kitchen and bathroom. And I think the reason for that is like those doors don't close. So like, even if we wanted to bring in somebody else as a roommate, like there's no privacy there. Like we had provided those like last meeting as well. That's still true.
No dishwasher.
Yeah, no dishwasher, no air conditioning. So like, I think there's a lot of those factors too that we should take into account in terms of what's considered, even if we're talking about fair market rate, let alone, you know, what should be an allowable increase under the rent control increase.
We have one more tenant too.
Yeah, I have a statement. I'm just reading from my phone.
That's perfectly fine.
Thank you all for the opportunity here. There's no need to repeat Garrett's opening introduction to you all, but I could say that I not only stand in agreement with his statement, but that it was honest. Nobody is trying to do a workaround that was previously mentioned. Garrett has been very honorable, not just to the tenants, including myself, but to the process created by the township, which you all sit on right now, and my wife and I, by not increasing our rent until this process was complete. That was the purpose of not increasing by the minimum rates last year and the year before. We moved from New Brunswick to Highland Park in a similar style unit with only 1 bedroom as opposed to our 2-bedroom unit we now have, paying $22.50, and moved here significantly under market value because we had the opportunity of moving at 1626, which was a great deal, under the knowledge that we were going to be leased. So we've been living without an increase for 2 years, and quite frankly, me and my wife love it. But we understood that it's going to go up. I understand that this board is not about a failed business model that it was previously called, but the numbers also do not lie. He's losing money month over month, and he's losing a significant amount of money each month, whether the board thinks it's egregious or not. The term bad investment keeps coming up, and I find it interesting that Garrett's good character in this situation is evident. You are giving him an opportunity to raise 215-1, but he isn't because he doesn't think it's right. You gave him, I heard it just before, you gave him an opportunity to raise 215-1, which is paying 1980 something, and he's not going to because he thinks it's fair market value for the condition that the units. Moving on to 213-2. Frankly, 1040 in Middlesex County for a 2-bedroom unit down the street from Rutgers, Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, and major transportation to New York City is quite frankly insane. I'm actually a little bit jealous. If Garrett wasn't losing a significant amount of money due to low-paying tenants, including myself, and wasn't struggling to pay the mortgage while taking care of a newborn baby, then we probably wouldn't be here today, because it could have been solved with a simple conversation that we previously stated. We are sitting here due to low rent. I acknowledge I pay extremely low rent at $16.26, and we agreed to increasing our rent to a fair market value. That's all I have.
Thank you. Questions from the board? I guess my first question was how, for you all in 213-1, or no, 215-2, right? It was how long you plan to stay, how close you were to finishing. It sounds like you intend to defend the dissertation within a year, though you should add maybe a margin around that. It took me 10 years. And then you don't plan to stay after that. So, and that is an opportunity for, I think we should also consider that, is that they once you leave, will be able to bring that up. And of course, just, I think we understand that disrupting, your rent amount in the middle of a school year can be difficult too. Can I ask, Michelle, you have an assistantship then? That's your.
Yeah, this year I had to teach for the English department. So yes, I'm not.
So you got an assistantship, right? They didn't make you do a 9-month or a 12-month contract?
I'm on a 9-month.
9-month, okay.
Yeah, I don't get a summer stipend.
And we're happy to write something into like a future lease that says like just for this year, because we are pretty confident we'll be able
For
to-
1 year and 1 year only
Yeah.
type of thing? Okay.
And again, we would have loved to discuss this, and Garrett has been very respectful in the discussions we've had, but we've
Is
had
that-
kind of radio silence when we've more recently been, approaching it to try to come up with a 1-year lease, so.
Ed, is there, like legally, is it possible to write into a lease that this is a 1-year deal? And if you stay beyond that, that the Right, we have to go up because
You
it.
could put a term in the lease. of
A term in the
course.
lease with it. Okay.
But that still doesn't negate the fact that he's losing money month to month. I understand everyone's situations. I have my own situation. Everyone has situations. I pay $500 a month in tolls to get to work.
I agree.
Just tolls, not gas, just tolls.
He's got a fair point.
It doesn't, that doesn't, I'm sorry, and it sucks. I was in very similar situations 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Everyone has a situation. And we've been delaying this for 2 years, or close to 2 years.
We just, the only reason we're delaying this is because we haven't been able to negotiate with, and we've, again, been very proactive in trying to reach out to Garrett and Janae to come.
And we can't help it. Took a year for this to come into effect. We had a meeting in November and it was postponed 2 more months, which we lost more money, 2 more months. So. I don't want to prolong the situation anymore. I just.
So Lori, your apartment seems to be the most complicated for, I think, for all of us. How long have you lived there?
Well, I think it's been about 6, maybe close to 7 years. I don't have the exact date.
Yeah. so that's my question.
Is there a, you said you were negotiating with Garrett. Did you ever get close to something that goes? No?
No, I don't think we really negotiated any, like, I recall getting an original lease to look over that was maybe like $600 or $700 increase. I don't recall the exact figure. And then I think he was gonna go down like $500 month increase, but still it was, I never, accepted or said I could accept it at the time. I really couldn't. But the ordinance had passed before the date we had to sign it, so that's where we are today.
So I think that the rent control ordinance was put in place to protect the tenants. The hardship was put in place, am I wrong, too? And now I'm seeing it more clearly. Maybe I was fuzzy before. And it seems like for the landlords that were impacted by Garrett had a business plan. I'm not, I take it back if it was a bad business plan or good. It was a business plan and he was executing his business plan. The rent ordinance came into place and it put a kibosh on his business plan. We have to look at the 1040 again is theoretically they would have, if they couldn't come to an agreement, he could have just crammed a lease at her and said, tough noogies, you're paying $1,600, $1,700. If she wanted to fight it, she could go to court and a judge would have come up with an agreeable number that for both parties based on whatever, the 5 criteria. So is that, how do we handle that? Do we become the judge and say, what, I don't even know.
That's the purpose of this board, right? Is for the exceptions to the ordinance, and that's exactly it.
Just realized, we do have some folks on, so we should probably ask if anybody at home
Well,
wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, let's, do we have any more
It
questions?
sounded like we were getting in deliberation.
Yeah,
mode.
we'll have that discussion with
But I
each
just
other.
wanted to remind you,
Yeah.
I don't see hands raised, but we didn't ask either.
All right, and also the questions from other people here. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I'm sorry. I just said, so you purchased the property in August of 2022?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah. No, I'm sorry.
And just go into reason, one of the clauses in the ordinance is you have to own for 12 months before the board will
See your
will
case,
hear
your
this, which is part of that timeline.
And the reason it took a little bit of time between August when we purchased the home to actually get in contact with the tenants is Garrett is in the military, he had military orders, and new to this, we're still trying to figure it out. And we went in with the intention of making it an easy going conversation, not trying to burden anybody. So we didn't think that we necessarily needed to jump on it and raise ranks and not question anything.
We understand. Do we have more questions from the board for the tenants before we
Let me
But
just ask one more thing.
Sorry.
Your previous landlords, so everybody except for you, sir, were existing tenants, right? Was there an effort to raise rents to the extent that you're seeing now?
She had a clause of she would raise the rent no more than 2%. That was written in our lease year over year.
Now,
Not for your units as well?
Yeah, I believe so. She didn't raise it every year, but by very small increments, she did raise it throughout my time.
Do you know why your unit was marketed so much
I
lower
think
than
just because I was one person and she knew that's what one person that I could afford on my salary. I don't really know the reason. I don't want to speculate.
I think, yeah, like, just to get more context on that, like the home before Garrett and Janae bought it was a kind of a family home. And like when we have looked at places, when we first moved to Highland Park, like one of the relevant decisions for us was that the criteria was that it was somebody who was a family home, and she said, she just wanted good tenants and she wanted tenants that would stay long term. So as opposed to maybe some of the other properties where we knew there might be rent increases. So I understand, like, from the landlord's point of view, like, right, they have an investment, and as you mentioned, you don't necessarily want to kibosh their business plan, but also, like, as tenants, we make decisions, especially as grad students, we make decisions not wanting to move for 4 or 5 years, and if something changes, in the middle, then that's also a consideration for us as well. So.
anyone else? Any last comments? All right, let's we'll now move on to if there's anyone on Zoom or anyone members of the public that want to speak to this issue. We'll give another opportunity for you to speak to in general to the board right at the end.
Anyone at home, please raise your hand on the Zoom app if you want to speak. You'd like to? Yeah.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I've been just kind of out of here. I'm a grad student at Rutgers in the Michael Strawbridge. I'm a grad student at Rutgers in the poli-sci department. I have absolutely no connections to this whatsoever. I'm just a politics nerd, and I was bored writing my diss, and we got an email blast about it, so I was sure I was come watch, why not? And I came back again because it was kind of entertaining. I guess I had a couple thoughts just around the case in general that have kind of already been hinted at. The first is that I'm sympathetic to both sides here. And I also just think that you guys could not have a possible worse guinea pig test with entire hardship concept. I think I've heard the phrase, what is a hardship, said so many times, and I've yet to hear an answer in the 2 hearings about it yet. And that's the most concerning thing for me. Because I think that's what makes it unfair to both sides here. Because it's depending upon how you define it, either side here could be right. And that's because you guys brought the issue of the precedent and external community. As a grad student here, I'm moving in 5 months. I graduate, so I'm done. So I don't care in that way. But knowing all the grad students here, it does raise concern for me of hypothetically, we define what they're going through as a hardship we want right now. What precedent that's set then, like you said, for the land moving forward to enact that in that way there. When I kind of like the idea being proposed before of this workaround with the money behind the scenes, not behind the scenes, but this other way of transferring the money to then not define hardship in this way. Because I think there's 2 issues of one, finding fairness in terms of compensation for them and their own situation, and then the hardship itself. And my concern is that by trying to help them with defining hardship this way is going to hurt other tenants moving forward. So it's you have 2 separate issues you're trying to solve with one here, and you can't do that, if that makes sense. And that's really one of my main concerns. I guess the other thing then regarding this hearing that I've been just kind of concerned with, and I was wondering just its protocol in general, if it's gonna be the right time or not, but I was kind of just confused around one side was very prepared for the first meeting and the other side wasn't. And how that then plays out in terms of this felt like an entirely separate hearing in many ways. It felt like we had one defense then and then one defense 2 months later. So I get you guys' complaints and I hear you guys with the disrespect. I'd probably be pretty hurt too if they're saying, bad investment, when it's that's your money involved right now. I'd be pretty pissed too. But it's I do think that some of that commentary and the nature of this like case is that the fact that the House been split up into almost two separate hearings, where we had all the evidence in hearing one in late November, and all the evidence for case number 2 here in January now. And like that raises a concern for protocol for me as well with that there. So the two separate things, the one's about being careful how you define hardship, because I feel like we're gonna get a ruling on this case and still not have the definition of hardship. I think we've all spent several hours down this room, and I don't think any of us can agree on the definition of hardship. And that's concerning, because then that goes beyond the parties involved here. That's an issue for then any tenant and landlord in the Highland Park community moving forward. So like, and I know the last thing you just said, like, you want to not be delayed any further. And I feel like part of me suggesting to delay that even more, because part of me is like, I want a firm definition of hardship, and that being like, explained to everyone. So I think if we had a clear definition for hardship, that might have influenced them even filing the application to begin with, because they would have said, hey, we don't qualify if it was X, Y, Z. So it's like part of me wants a decision delayed until there is a firm definition deliberated around what hardship is here, because I think that's fair to everyone, because I think that lack of transparency is what's led to a lot of the kind of different arguments taking place here right now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Andrew Gosselin. I'm also a grad student over at Rutgers. I wasn't here for the meeting a couple months ago, but from my takeaway from all this, Garrett, right? You seem like a great guy from living in this community. I know as board members or council members, we want people who live in our community to invest in the community. So what he's doing seems great, owning a property, investing in it. But as you mentioned, owning property is an investment, and there is risk associated with it, just like the stock market. It was definitely an extremely unfortunate time for things to happen, but you're still building equity. What seems like a possible scenario that this route could go, we want people in the community to invest in the community, and not some suit sitting behind a desk in New York City. So if there's some way that Highland Park can possibly to help upfront the costs of people who are still building in their rental workings, I'm not sure the word for it, and then it's slowly like taxed back over time to recoup that investment. That seems like a possible way to go. But the way that it kind of sounds is that his hardship is not like something like Hurricane Sandy, which is an extreme hardship, which comes out of nowhere, but the fact that he just isn't able to raise rents to account for other costs. So that was kind of my takeaway from this. So in how you're defining the hardship, just really figuring that out, like you were saying.
Thank you, Andrew. Others, and if we check Zoom one more time.
No, I don't see any hands up on Zoom.
All right, so I think we should move on to deliberate this. I would say that I think we do need to start with the definition of hardship. I think that it would have been great, of course, for the council to define that for us, but I think it also makes it so that we can be flexible, that if we decide, I think we've mentioned already that unforeseen circumstances are different than just operating at a loss, based on, go ahead.
Can I just real quickly, and I know we didn't define hardship, but I wanted to point out the matter of Salem Management Company versus Township of Patcong. The court noted that rent control ordinances should allow efficient landlords to obtain reasonable returns on their investments. And then we also have the matter of Hutton Park Gardens versus Town Council of West Orange, sets forth that rent control ordinances that fail to allow owners to realize profit must be deemed to intend and so read to permit property owners to apply to the local administrative agencies, which is what we're doing here, to for a ground for regulation that entitles the owner to a reasonable rate of return. That's, and I know we're still not defining hardship, but I'm just saying that the landlord in this case has a hardship in that he really has no cushion at all. The amount of money he's making on this building is actually less than the expenses, and we're just talking about the fixed expenses without even talking about what happens with vacancy and credit loss, what happens with repairs. There's no sinking fund at all. There's no reserves for replacement. There's really nothing that allows the landlord to make any reasonable rate of return on this building. And and that to me is a hardship.
So let's, hypothetical here, though, let's say they got somebody to then buy the property for even, I know there was somewhere around 800, right, 800K, that they get somebody to buy the property for $1 million or $1,200,000, and then that landlord wants to raise them even more and more. Do we consider that a hardship then, because somebody bought it at, operating already that way? I mean, first of all, we need to define hardship. It kind of, regardless of any of this, because that's what's in our ordinance, right, is to.
I understand.
I actually think there's a section of the ordinance that talks about the evaluation of a fair mortgage amount. So assuming that our mortgage went through that a process that you guys would get behind, which I assume it did, right? It receives evaluation, it receives an inspection, and it goes through this process. And then I think part of the clause in the ordinance actually speaks to agreeing that the mortgage value or its assessed value is fair as a first point.
And also to add to that, like we mentioned earlier, this case I think is very unique and different because if another investor comes into town and wants to buy a property, they're going to look at their possible rent roll with the increase, the maximum amount of increase in mind. And then that's an informed decision that they can make. We didn't have that opportunity here.
I think
that's the definition of a hardship in our specific case. And I think candidly, the hardship is probably supposed to be seen on a case by case basis. I think we're trying to overarch here, but there's not going to be a case similar to ours. And there's not going to be a case similar to the next one. And I think you have to, look into each case individually.
Yeah, I think that was the board's concern, that if we give the increase in this case to like 213.2 and give a major increase from 1040, well, what's to stop the next landlord from doing it? The next landlord's not going to have the same situation as my clients. They came in. The fundamental concept of capitalism is that everyone should have perfect information. My clients went in with clearly not perfect information. They went in thinking that they could buy this building and obviously not raise the rent to the point where they're going to create a massive profit, but at least create a decent life for themselves.
Honest.
And honest life for themselves. And they find out like a couple months after they buy the property, no, we can't do that anymore.
All right, moving forward. Thank you for all that. By the way, we talked about market failures and the assumptions of capitalism today in my government business class. I said exactly what you just said. I think going forward, we'll let the tenants speak one more time, but I think we've closed the question answer part. All the information that we just shared, besides the court cases, were things that we had already heard. And I think we need to stick to deliberations here rather than one giant deliberation. So since we allowed one side to speak one more time, I'm gonna open the floor back up to the tenants, and then I think we close it from there to not to close the meeting, but we keep the discussion within the board from moving forward.
I would just make the point, again, and this is kind of with all due respect, like I understand the landlord situation of trying to make a profit, and we're not wishing them to lose money, right? But also, if you're making such a big investment, like it's a different thing than if you're a tenant. You're making such a big investment. I would think it's also like that's part of the research that should be done too. Is like what ordinances are coming through the town, and the second point I would make is exactly what your HP, which is like you might lose money 1 or 2 years, right? But you're building, as the gentleman said, you're building equity, and there's nothing like when we leave in a year, like you guys are gonna have a really good market, and like you might be able to make a lot of money that year. So there's nothing on the other side to say, oh, well, like the landlord is making too much money this year, so we're gonna reduce the rent, right? So I think that has to be taken into consideration. It balances out over the years. It's not just a 1 year, especially not the first year of the investment.
Right, and then we also don't reduce rents when tenants lose their jobs and suffer hardships. I mean, there are hardship programs as the government steps in, but I think that's a good consideration. All right, so let's close comments from the public for now, and maybe start working on these deliberations about the definition of hardship and determining whether this is. Go ahead, Jared.
So I think this is actually, we're getting somewhere here, and the gentleman over there, we can define hardship in this case, and it's a function of an ordinance was put in place, and landlords that were impacted directly based on a business plan that happened within a certain parameter, certain time frame or window. that impacted them, which this clearly did. There's definitely some rents here that would have gone up. So my understanding as a landlord, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can. The rent control ordinance went into place to protect tenants. We're here to now listen to landlords that are impacted by this. And this, they were definitely impacted by this. And so they have a hardship. The hardship was irrespective of their expenses, they were growing, and I don't even know if it's important to know exactly $5 here, or if they had to buy Windex for this or that. Knowing from a landlord, they're paying $6,500 a month in mortgage insurance and amortization. And then there's plenty of R&M that goes into that property. And so there's maybe $1,000 more a month in at least in expenses toward that property. So there is a hardship, and it's associated with that they were executing their business plan, and our town ordinance impacted them, and we have to assume that they did not know about it. We have to, I mean, we can't. And so we assume, and so what was their impact? And then, so they have a hardship, and now we have to figure out if we want to compensate them in some way to bring them closer to whole.
Can I take a quick straw poll of, because I think if we are going to try to make a decision tonight, and step one is just deciding if there is a hardship, and then step two is a decision of what a fair amount looks like in terms of the percentage on increase on top of what's allowable by the ordinance. Can we get if the argument now on the table at this moment is that we need to define hardship? Of course, there are different definitions that we could use here. I think that we've sort of made the point that the timing of it in this case makes it sort of unique in when they bought it and when the ordinance went into place, and the properties that were under, being were already being rented far under market, that was not, part of their business plan to keep them that low. Can we maybe try to make a decision on, is this a hardship first before we decide on
Well, I think there really is, as Michael's, there's really no definition of hardship. It's kind of like pornography. As the Supreme Court said, you'll know it when you see it. So that's your job. And that's really the difficult thing you have to go through. I think if you take a look at section 27, it says landlords can come to the administrator and eventually to this board with a hardship request. And that has to be based upon a landlord who is unable to meet his or her mortgage payments, expenses, and maintenance costs, or is operating at a loss, is entitled to apply for a hardship increase. And that would mean an increase in addition to the basic increase that you're allowed every year. That's as close as you're going to get to a definition of hardship. There are probably two hardships that you're really struggling with. One is this definition, and whether or not this intervening ordinance, which came in, and this will be the only time you'll ever have to fortunately deal with this, upset the business plan of a landlord who was buying property and was probably going to increase the rent in order to cover their nut. That was probably the business plan. And all of a sudden, this ordinance jumped in and upset that plan. And we've received now two sets of financial information. And as Jared said, certainly the new information you've given is a lot clearer and eliminates some of the stuff that you even said, whoops, that shouldn't be in there, and so on. So I don't think there's any real question that the numbers that are coming in and the cost associated with running this building or this complex is running as a deficit. I mean, I don't think anybody could quarrel with that type of testimony. I think even the tenants get that and feel that. The other hardship is kind of the personal hardship, the impact that an increase, a substantial increase might have on Lori and the other tenants. I mean, that's a real hardship, don't get me wrong. But it's not our hardship in terms of what the ordinance defines. Not to say you can't consider that. Again, like pornography, when you look at it, you're going to have to decide how you evaluate those hardships on the decision that you're going to make. And I think clearly in this case, the ordinance itself, the timing of the ordinance did lead to the landlord hardship. I mean, I think it's pretty clear from 2 nights worth of testimony and all the documents that you got. They never anticipated being stuck with whatever the rents were in this building, particularly the lower ones, which people have become accustomed to and which they've allowed to float while we're trying to figure this thing out. So there's some credit should be given for that. But the other side of it doesn't make it any easier if suddenly Lori's rent's going to go up $500 a month. That's a hardship. That's a hardship. Not a defined hardship. That's a hardship. So you've got to balance those things out when you come up with a per unit decision about what these folks can charge for their rental units.
Thank you for that, and also for bringing pornography into the discussion tonight. So they do, and they clearly do meet this at least the criteria that they're operating at a loss. And certainly we don't just want to pass the hardship from the landlord to the tenant. Can we take it's not a vote, but a straw poll on?
He brought up a good point, and I think we need to, it'll help with this board going forward. In that, when I brought up an argument that, and one of the tenants did that if a mortgage goes up or down and the profits, no, it actually doesn't matter. This hardship is purely a function that he bought a property and the rent board came in and created his hardship based on that, based on a frozen period of time where his mortgage was. It doesn't, landlords now can't, just because they're not, maybe they can, but they're not, we can argue that they don't have a justification, can't come to us if mortgage rates go up another 3%. Oh, I can't pay.
Let's deal with that when we get there.
But so this is truly a hardship, and it's not a function of a mortgage payment or an interest rate.
And it's unique in the sense that I think of that, what Ed said about the fact that the timing of it, it's not precedential in the way that we're worried about, in the sense that this is not setting a rate for every other landlord to come in. The timing of it was there. What I was asking though is, can we take a straw? Do we all agree at least that that this is, that we should consider raising this, that this does constitute a hardship, and that we should consider raising this, now moving on to the discussion of how much it would be raised?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah. I'll abstain. Can we now that we've established that we are going to consider this for an increase, let's talk about how we then, where we want to calculate that. Jared had already put a proposal on the table. We were looking at
apartment by apartment. So we'll take an apartment and we can discuss.
Okay. So let's start with 213.1 then. This is the one that's currently at 1626. Had they raised it, had they raised it by the allowable amount by the ordinance over the last 2 years, 4.475 and 3.8, or 4.475 in 2023 and 3.8 in 2024, that would bring them to 1763 at that point. Now, what they're asking for is above that amount. So we can either consider giving them that, which is allowing them to take the advantage of one that they wouldn't be able to at this point now, which is the 2023 increase. Still weird to me to say 2024, so bringing it up to 1763, it would be allowing that sort of that retroactively applying the ordinance set amount. So 1763 starting point. Do we think that should give them more than that on top of that, or is that sufficient for this particular property? Do we want to look at the pictures of 213.1 for again? We're going to consider these apartment by apartment. Here is, up there. Gotta be this one.
And all the tenants want 12-month leases, is that correct?
We want till December. So we would want our lease.
Then
Each one of the ones that they submitted, mine have labels.
Yours have
The
numbers.
ones with staples have the apartments listed on the front.
Staples have on the back.
On the front.
Yeah, so this one's 215-2, 215-1, and 213-2.
There's
We
one
don't
more
have-
set, someone said.
There's 213-1 somewhere, the one we're talking about. Oh, Jared's got it, hiding over there.
213-1.
Should I display them for everyone, maybe just so we remember which one we're looking at? You all want to see that again too. All right, discussion on 213-1, starting, well, we don't have to start. I propose that we start the negotiation of this number at 1763, which would have been the amount it would be now had they taken advantage of.
So
Yeah,
the
with
increase- so
compounding.
the increase would be
Sorry,
No, no.
yeah. That's $137.
Yeah,
a month
that's
raise.
right.
Right, I just wanted to put that on the table
Yes.
so we could see.
It's 137 raised, but that's 4.475 and 3.8 compounded, starting at 16.
Right,
This is how
but-
much they would have raised. it.
Right, but I'm saying
But it's not
$137.
Right,
Right, $137 to add to rent. I wouldn't say that is a hardship for a tenant because it's 137.
right. So if we're starting there, we may
So
propose that we want to
starting
do more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I don't think it's egregious, but I think it's what they were entitled to.
right.
Right,
So,
right, what they were
um,
entitled, right, so I feel.
But I
that
don't
that's
think it
fair.
needs to
After
be
2
more than
years,
that.
right, right, after, yeah.
That's what I think.
That's what they're entitled to on that one. But Diane's proposing that it doesn't need to be more than that, that this is getting very close to
Right.
Yeah.
It's what it should have been.
What it should have been, yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
of course, they're asking for an amount above that, which is,
Are they asking? I mean, I haven't heard that number. What are they asking for?
Yeah.
we have those from the first meeting, I think, don't we?
Oh,
what were the requested rents?
Yeah, the requested rents, we should take those into account.
From the original application?
Yeah,
2,100.
2,100, all right. So moving it 1626, if they had only taken the allowable amount in the last 2 years, 1626 would have moved, in 2024 be 1763. And they were asking for us to consider 2,100 as a
That's
rent
right,
here.
2,100.
100
Discussion on that.
and 1763.
And it's a fairly large discrepancy still between what the landlords are, what their ask is and the tenants, where they are.
It's a 30% increase, right?
Huh?
Is that a 30? how
From
much?
1626 to, yeah.
Hmm.
For what it's worth, in Highland Park, free rental control ordinance, we raise our rents on good years 4% and bad years 2.5%. So roughly, they go up about 3.5%.
So you've never raised more than,
Not on occupied.
On the occupied, that's what we're talking. Yeah, different.
Renovated. On in-place rents,
Can you get
um,
some more?
right, so it's about 3.5%. We never, no, nobody, you don't push the rents. Even on years like the COVID years when rents were going crazy and stuff, or post-COVID. So, why don't we take this 1763 and then just keep going through all of
So
them?
we'll keep that, like, Start with that one. All right. So let's move on to 213.2. This is the lowest, currently the lowest one at 1040. If they had taken, if they had increased it by the allowable amount, in 2024, that would be 1127. What that comes up to, 1127.
What was the?
How much was?
What was the ask for?
What was the ask?
They were looking for
1540.
1540.
Yeah.
So 1120, the gap actually is smaller there, 1127 to 1540.
It's $87.
That's your number, right? 15, that's what you were after.
Yeah, we were only asking for
That's
30%.
87,
We
so-
didn't want to go higher than 30% increase. So.
Okay,
a $500 increase.
Yeah. Which is,
No, 50%.
that's a 50%. It's a
I said
50.
$500.
Oh, he said.
Oh, so was that more than 30%?
It's a 50.
Yeah, it's 50% of 1040 to
That one.
1540.
Yeah, that one because it's so.
Which,
So low.
you know, I have to say at this point, I think Lucinda used to come to the meetings and say, we need rent control because people
Well,
are
it's
being
getting
raised
50%.
Right.
50%.
I think 50% in anybody's budget would be very difficult to weather, like, if, I mean.
Right, well, that's the ask.
Yeah, that's the ask. The ask is a 50% increase, but brings, bringing them retroactively for last year, and then with this year's increase, 1127. Which you said was $87, right?
Mhm.
$87. I should be able to do that math, but my brain is tired. What do we think?
Well, we're gonna go through all
We're
of
gonna
them.
go through
Yeah,
all
we're
of
gonna
them.
do the
So
adjustments.
we want the adjustments first. Okay, 215.1, that's the one they've already negotiated.
Stay in.
Yep. And then 215.2 is starting at 1504, and with the allowable increases would bring it up to 1631.
And the.
they're asking 2100.
And they're asking 2100 on that one.
I believe so, right? 2100.
I can't do 1504 plus 596.
Wait, isn't this the family members?
No, that was
No,
the
we
first
skipped that
one.
one.
Oh,
That was the first one.
That we skipped that one, yeah.
250.
That was 215.1. This is 215.2. This is,
We didn't skip that one.
213 is family member.
The HP, we didn't skip that
Oh.
one.
63.
Yes.
but 215.1 is the one that you already have an agreement. We don't need to do anything with that one.
One is.
That's fine.
2100, that's correct for the last.
much
So
is it?
are there two that we
They'd
don't need
ask
to look
21.
at?
They'd ask for 21. That's what they asked for.
Yeah, but 215.1, we're not doing anything with because they've already
No,
agreed to it.
there are only 3
No.
units.
Right,
that
3
are
units now.
under
So
215.1,
Out of,
Take
out
off
of the
the
picture,
two.
That's
a brand new
215.2.
lease.
Yeah, 215. So the family member, sorry, I'm mistaken. That's 213.1. Back to 215.2 is increased from 1504. With the allowable increase would bring it up to 1631.
So those are the three rents that we are under, that we need to deep dive into, right?
And that increases the dollar amount of their monthly revenue by $351, which doesn't cover their 400 whatever deficit that they're running right now on average. And I know there's gonna be shocks to the system and all that, so we all agree to that, but like considering that's their average right now, the actual deficit they're running, it doesn't cover it, but it gets them a lot closer.
No, I misunderstood their expenses. What they provided us, he provided us an Excel spreadsheet. And it's every time you have to put a blind on a wall, it's 12, 15 bucks, and you gotta hire someone to go and do it, or you do it yourself. He's got $1,000, $1,500 a month in R&M maintenance on the apartments, maybe $750 in a good month. So that's $6,600 that he's paying is just his mortgage and his insurance on his mortgage.
I mean,
His
at
taxes.
the beginning of the meeting, when in their presentation, that was part of it. He gave us his deficit, as part of that,
That's
his
your
monthly deficit is 400 and something.
That was only with mortgage, interest, utilities, and then in my statement, I just shared that was before we discussed.
Before we consider all this,
That-
okay.
that's-
So considering that too, but again, it doesn't even bring them to covering it doesn't even bring them up to covering just that part of it, the mortgage and what they presented.
I think let's talk about the 1040 and we've heard her, we've heard him, we've heard the landlord, we've heard the tenant. What's fair? There's
An extra
obviously-
5%, can we calculate that, an extra 10%?
But-
See what
Off
there's-
the retro, off the new price or? off the
Yeah,
old one?
so 1127 is where we'd be starting from. I think we all agree that retroactively applying at least the allowable amount is a fair starting point. For, if we start 11/27, what's an extra 5% of that? And what's an extra 10%?
But take into account that if he wanted to be a difficult landlord, he could take her to court.
Sure.
And he could let a judge decide what is fair.
He can still do that if he.
No, he can't.
And a judge can also.
Can a
force them
judge
to-
now?
To mediate as well, to
Yep.
come to terms. A judge can say, get back to me in 6 months.
Right.
Have something worked
Right.
out.
But now
Why
that
do we
rent
have a
control is in place, that overrides any type of, a judge will just say, no, there's rent control. I don't want, you can't raise
That's
this
what I
$500.
Why would
anymore."
you-
It totally kiboshes his business plan.
Well, the judge can take that into consideration when trying to figure out if it's a conscionable or unconscionable rent.
Well, you know what, I'm gonna have to tell you that if a landlord seeks a rent increase in court that exceeds what the rent leveling ordinance allows, without getting permission like here, like with the hardship increase, if we go to court with asking for an increase larger than what you allow, that's called consumer fraud. I wrote the State Bar Association's article on rent control law and rent increase law, so I'm pretty familiar with this stuff. If I ask for a rent increase, I can only ask for what you guys approve.
That's what I questioned, was as soon as we put a rent ordinance in place, a landlord could never go to a court to try to argue that it's governed by, that's how I take it. That's how I took it when I read the ordinance on my properties. It's, okay, these are my fixed rents from now on.
Why would it be-
Well, I
why
mean-
would it be fixed?
They get
They're
the,
fixed increases.
Fix the limit.
Okay,
the-
but that's anywhere. I mean, and so, I mean, you know.
No, it's
a-
only in
a
towns
landlord
with
is-
rent ordinance.
Well, that's right, but a landlord is going to hopefully be able to forecast, the success of your investment by future tenant turnover, by forecasting kind of how, I mean, when you purchase a property, people are not commodity. You have people, humans, who are living and have expenses and don't have control over who owns this property. So that's
why you put the rent ordinance.
Well, that's
in
what,
place.
exactly. So, but I'm just saying, it's like, to the gentleman who made the point that this is an investment property, that's exactly what it is. It's a long-term investment. Is the board trying to make everyone whole and profitable? Now, whole is one thing, profitable is another thing.
Agreed.
Right now, because they will be profitable.
But this is more.
We know what direction everything's
We
going.
argued that this was a hardship because we put the ordinance in place.
they have
at that
equity in real
particular
estate is
moment in
only
time,
going to go
and
up,
that's
right?
impacting the rent.
Scarcity.
I think that's something to consider. I don't know if that would be a hardship, but yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate.
Well, that's what.
Okay,
our-
Colleen's on stack.
I had a question. Did we hear that somebody is gonna be moving?
Those were the two graduate students, that's 215-2, that they're in 215-2.
215-2.
So we could bring theirs up, I would propose bringing theirs up to 1631, which would retroactively with what it was, and put a provision in their contract that it's only for one more year that it would stay at that, at that level or whatever. Or that they would move out after a year or something like that,
Where are you
right?
getting that 16?
Oh, that would be, had they done the ordinance raises, or had they increased by 14?
They've been held flat. So that's just putting the rent control.
That's putting the rent control ordinance, they haven't raised them at all in 2 years,
Oh,
that retroactively applying the amount we allow.
So after 1 year, the rent leveling ordinance would not apply to that unit?
What?
After 1 year, the rent leveling ordinance would not apply to that?
No, that they're moving, that they would leave after a year or whatever. We talked about a provision earlier, what was it?
The thing that we could.
Sorry, but my point wasn't they're moving after a year or whatever. My point is if they're moving out, the landlord has grounds to recover. He at that
Increase the
point.
rent.
They can raise it at that
He
point.
Control it.
He can,
Decontrol.
right. So I'm saying we can't be all things to all people, meaning he's gonna have instances where he can come up with people leaving and coming and whatever. So in our transactions, and in fairness to both parties, we need to know that he will be able to break even at some point in that regard. So I just wanted to put that on.
I mean, any investment in real estate at this
And
point is going
yes.
to eventually be very profitable in terms of the equity they built and the value of the property.
So that was just my point, not not making a provision for the ones that will be moving out in a year or whatever, but just knowing in fairness to the tenants that he's gonna have leeway to come up further than he is now or whatever.
So I would propose to start with these, knocking them out one at a time and not necessarily in order, that for 215-2, which is the ones that will be probably moving out, they're finishing graduate school, one's already working in Boston, right? So the landlords will have an opportunity in the near future to
12 months.
in 12 months to make it profitable, and that even they may be operating at a loss, but they're building equity and the value of the property is probably going up overall. I would propose that we just for the year increase it to retroactively apply with the allowable increases, bringing it up to 1631 and leave it there. Do I need to can I make a motion as we go through these one by one, or do we have to?
Well, I don't, why don't we, because I'm gonna.
Why we consider them one by one? I think,
What
yeah.
you say might change how you feel.
Right,
about
okay.
one.
Well, we don't have to vote on, we can always go back, but like, does that
Let me
sound?
give you a proposal, a counter proposal. They agreed to 1954, you say 1763 or
1631.
split the difference. Because they agreed before the rent ordinance
Well,
to 19.
How about we split the difference between the original then and what they're asking for, which is 1504?
I'm for the landlord now. Regardless, they were gonna pay 1954 and then all of a sudden the rent ordinance came in and then they held off. Right?
So that's a counter proposal.
So split the difference between make it 1850 or something like that. Then, you know what I mean?
What percentage increase is 1850 over 1504 though? That's a pretty,
That's a little hefty.
that's a heck of a
They
graduate.
were gonna
Also-
pay it. They were gonna pay it.
But
23.
wait, but they were relying on rent control to protect them.
Right.
But
That's not
they
binding.
they didn't know about
They
rent
told you
control.
under
already.
pressure, they were, yeah, but, I mean, they
Be
did
careful,
wait for
Mike.
rent control
Lucinda?
because
Say
rent
again?
control is
Okay.
gonna protect them.
Okay, I've
It's
given my
still,
proposal.
what is it?
It comes to, if you go off of 1504 to 18, whatever you just said, just put it in the 23% from where they are right now.
23.
To the
To what,
1954.
to what, no, to what Jared, the split the baby.
But what's, and the other way, Carrie, is only brings them up to $137, is that correct?
The 1631, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
So one increase would be $137. Your increase would be,
I can't, Jared, what was your original number? Because I
Was it
punched it in.
I went off the.
He wanted-
Are you at 1954?
He wants to split the difference between what they're paying now and that amount, not the
1954
increased version.
Minus current.
Yeah, the
minus
current one. There we go.
current Is 29, is that right?
Actually, I think Jared's proposal was 1954 plus an extra 3.8%.
Well,
Yeah, we're not doing that one though.
I think we're negotiating here.
Yeah, we're negotiating here. Also, again, we'll keep the deliberations now, we're among the board.
Yeah,
Um,
29.9, 30%.
So what's the number? What's
Wait,
the
hold
number?
on.
Oh,
So-
the actual dollar value.
Yeah.
34
I thought you wanted
minus
the percent increase.
1504 is 450, so it'd be a $225 increase would be splitting the difference. $225 over 15 instead of 137 over 50. So we split the difference between 1504 and the 1984, whatever.
1954.
1954, I did put it in right, I think. The difference is $450. So if we split the difference of that, which is what Jared's proposing, we would increase it by $225. And that would be
So 1504 plus 225, 1729.
1729. So we have two proposals on the table. We have
Which is cheaper
1631.
than your 1763.
Hold on.
No, it's
What
not.
was the number you
That's
just gave?
$137.
17 what?
1729.
1729.
No,
As
okay, let me
opposed
read them
to-
off. I have them in a column here. Currently 1504. If we only apply retroactive rent increases, 1631. If we go with this 225, which is splitting. the
So Jared
difference-
split the difference one.
This was a difference one. The total rent monthly, that up by over 1504 is 1729, which is about a 15% increase.
All right. So my proposal is 1631. Jared has a counter proposal, which is 1729. 29.
The 1729 is a 23.
No, that's 15.
15%.
That's 15
Above the 1504.
over where they are right now, not over, yeah, over 1504.
And it's still $230 below what they agreed to on this email,
$225.
plus or minus.
No, exactly.
I'll argue with you. You win.
Thanks. Thoughts? I've made my proposal. Jared's made his. I think they're both at least pretty close to each other. So, or maybe if other.
Well, then let's split them.
Oh my goodness. There's actually a book called like about negotiating. That's something about like don't bargain. It's about meeting in the middle is the like you know how negotiations often work, and
Wait,
that's
your
not
increase is
not
gonna
really
be
what.
in dollars.
So mine would be increasing $137, right? Is that the
Oh, yeah.
to
Mhm.
1631?
Right. And Jared, your increase is 225?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
225 to 1729
How much is that?
as a
Yours is
percentage.
137 as a number.
The one what?
Oh, you want me to
It
just
would
do
go
it
from
225
1504 to
minus?
1729.
It should be $225 exactly.
Probably the
Like
percentage.
17%.
Oh, what's the percentage of it? You said something like 23%.
So your proposal, which is the just retroactive only, is an 8.4%, and Jared's proposal at 225 over where they are is 15% increase.
Okay. And
So
then
they're
but,
almost half of each other. It's not
right, and
exact,
the,
but,
my,
you
the
know,
8.4 by the way would be you know,
that's just using our existing rent leveling
Yeah.
numbers. Retroactive.
so so the difference between those would be the additional percentage that we would. What's that? What's the
7%. In other words, they're
roughly
entitled
short?
to 8.
Give them the amount they're entitled plus an extra 7%. I would really like to just stick to the allowable increase on this unit, since given the situation of the tenants who are in the middle of a school year who are planning to leave, at which time the landlords will be able to increase however much they want, right, in between, when they rent to someone new. And they can recover their costs then if for now they're building equity. I understand that they have this email exchange. They agreed to also, like they've explained, it was under pressure, and I think we've
It's
taken
under
that
duress.
into account a little bit, but I think that that is unreasonable. I think that when they said that, I mean, given I know her contract, I negotiated it, and I know exactly how much she makes based on what she told me there. Like, this is that increase is gonna be a lot for grad students. Like, and I think the fact that they're gonna leave in a year, hopefully she's gonna defend, they're gonna go get awesome tenure track jobs somewhere, because those exist still. Then
I'm not looking at it. You're putting emotion and personal stuff into it. I'm looking at it from a logic, math, timeline.
sure.
Yeah.
I fully admit that I'm being subjective here.
I'm looking
And
at.
I think that I don't think that's
at it
wrong.
From a landlord's perspective, which is why you asked me to be, somebody asked me to be on the board,
But
where for a year, this gentleman, who actually seems very nice and is a lot nicer than 99% of the landlords, wasn't.
strike that from the video. Yeah, including him.
I take exception. I'm a landlord.
He's been sitting around for a year because he didn't know what to do with these rents and he didn't know what to do, so he wasn't able to do anything. I don't, as a landlord, and this is horrible, but everybody has a tough story. Everybody does, and they're all true, and they all suck, and you feel for them. But I'm gonna say my piece. Under duress, as you say, they agreed to $1,954. I'm saying, okay, well, let's not do 1954. Let's give them a $225 break on that.
seems fair.
And that's still, and they're only gonna be there for 11 more months, and then they have to pay that, and this guy has thousands of dollars. The one thing I don't want him to have to do is not make repairs because he can't, because that's worse than anything. So I really feel strongly about a $200+ reduction from what he agreed to pay 2 years ago. Not now, 2 years ago, he agreed to pay this, and rents have gone up significantly from 2 years ago. So I feel strongly about the 729.
1729.
Well, between the two of you, if you split it, added it and divided it, it'd be 181.
Oh, 181 difference, so.
So instead of 225 or 137, it would be 181.
Oh, yeah, we're only about $100 apart, so it'd be $50 more than that. It'd be about 1680, roughly 1680 for the rent.
So let's do that.
Sure,
If it brings Jared and I to consensus, I'll accept.
So please just say it in plain dollars. How much over the
All right,
current?
hold on. So 1729 minus 1631
Okay.
divided by 2, and then 1631 plus that number.
I don't think.
Splitting the difference between 1631 and 1729.
I don't think that
Jared's
gets
number
it.
was 225.
Yeah,
Right, it's 225 increase.
yeah. and your
Heather's number
increase
was
is
137.
631.
Oh, you're just doing the difference amount. So the rent amount, if we just split the difference between 1631 and 1729 is there, I mean, we need to know both, right? 29 minus 1631 is 98 divided by 2, 196 plus 1631, 1827.
You multiply by
1540.
Oh, was it 98? 98 was the difference?
I don't like where.
We could do the math if, you know.
Yeah, this is easy math compared to like the other stuff. that are-
Graduate students, they can do it.
So 98 is how much,
put the
we're $98
spreadsheet up on the-
apart, right? We're $98 apart. So we would add 49 or 49 on top of mine. So 1631 plus 49. We're $98 apart now, me and Jared.
You can have it. You win.
So if
I-
he's saying 1729, I'm saying 1631. We're $98 apart. If we split the difference in that, we need to add $49 to mine, and that will get us to splitting the
1680.
difference. What was it?
Sounds fair.
1680.
1680.
So
that's
I'm
what I said
dividing
before.
the 98 by 2 is what you're saying?
Right, because we're splitting the difference. We're
So
98 apart
49,
now, so we
So
need to.
1631 plus 49 is 1680, which is a nice round.
1680.
Oh, a round number.
Sounds good. 1680 it is.
Okay.
All in favor?
Oh, yeah, motion to move.
Have you decided on
We
what?
have.
No, but can we, I mean, we can
Yes.
take interim votes, can't we?
Sure.
I think we take interim
Everybody
vote.
happy with
Now
that
that
for now?
now that we're rolling, let's do.
We'll do it.
Our 1040.
Let's do it, well, like, because we haven't, we've kind of heard from Lucinda on this, real quick, rather than doing a official vote, can we do right now a straw poll on a temporary unofficial vote that we all agree on this one, so we can move on?
Yes.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Nays,
1680.
no abstentions. All right, so we're in agreement about 1680
Okay.
for unit 215-2.
I get the tough one. And for
We're gonna go next to the tough one, or should we do the
Let's just keep going. Let's do the 1040. I propose I tried to figure it out, like, and I said, you know what? I think a firm 30% is increase, right? So it'd be like a $1,350 just, and it's not insane. It's a lot, but she's been paying 1040 forever. And he's never gonna be able to unlock that ever. So she's gonna pay 3.5% next year, or 3.8% next year. And it's kind of not close to market, but it's not a hard, I don't know. I don't know her financial situation, but
that's an extra $310 a month.
it's
So-
an extra $310.
And just to be clear, since we started the other one this way, retroactively applying the allowable amount brings it to 1127. So as a starting point.
Right, and just that if you go with the 1,300, that's a 25%.
That's
1350.
Oh, I thought you said 1,300.
Are we allowed to apply it over time? Can we say that we'll let them go up? You know, like say they can go, rather than 25% at once, let them go up, 10%,
We could
10% extra
probably
this
do-
year and
Until
10%
it
extra
gets
next year.
decontrolled or-
That could be in-
Above whatever the amount is, 10%
That
and,
could be written into a new lease agreement. That's what they want.
well, I'm saying for us, can we decide that it's only,
You have to give them permission.
that they can, yeah, that they can only do it if
At what we
they,
decide when-
Maybe, I don't even know how.
if they roll it out over
I would
time?
have to figure that out.
Yeah, but they don't have much time.
No, we're talking about.
No, I mean, so instead of a 25% jump
talking
in
about
1 year,
1040 now.
we give them 3
Apartments
years to get
13
up to that point. I would rather agree to something like, they can go above the allowable rent by 2% for the next 3 years or something, then.
Well, $20 isn't gonna help anybody out,
Right.
and, so
Why,
like,
why aren't we doing it like the previous one?
Because,
why-
because for most people, like a 25% increase in their living expenses at any given time, for most of the working class, like is difficult to
So
weather.
why can't we negotiate it lower?
I think I mean, that's another option.
Right.
I was just
because-
asking if it was
No,
allowable.
I'm just saying,
I would like it to go to 11/27, which would be retroactively applying.
That's the allowable increase.
The allowable increase.
For the last 2
Can I
years.
ask a question? Are you limited? And this is all very personal and you don't have to answer, but does the lease allow the tenant to have a roommate if she so chooses?
Have a what? I'm sorry.
Roommate.
Oh, roommate.
We don't, in a contract, you can't sublet, but in an effort to bring our, her rent up, we would be more than willing to.
I mean, she may not want to.
Diana, I don't know if we wanna
It's-
get
but-
involved in like
well,
asking people to bring
it's-
roommates in, like, we're not, we're a.
It's just a lease.
I'm not exactly
consideration.
like, you have to get a roommate.
No,
We'll
you
we'll
don't.
decide on who they are.
You don't have to, but she should not be prohibited from doing
Right.
that because.
Yeah,
of
you
her
can say
lease.
1350 and you're more than welcome to bring in a
No, you
roommate.
don't even have to say that, but as long as she's
you
not
don't, as
prohibited.
long as there's no barrier,
There's
it's
no-
fine. Yeah. Oh,
Well, if she had a partner, they would be allowed to move in. probably, right?
I think the problem, and hear me out, HP, with your 1127 is it's significantly below market. We all know that. It's not any. And if rent control had not come into place, which is why we're saying there's a hardship here, he would be in front of a judge right now and they'd be negotiating this. And
Right, but
I
right
don't-
now I'm negotiating with you, so I'm starting there, assuming you're
I'm
gonna
not- I don't
offer
wanna
something
nego-
higher, we're
I
gonna
want to
go up.
agree with you. I don't want to negotiate. This should be just a logical conversation. So a judge would not look at our rent control and he would look at it and say, well, 1,900 is market, you're paying 1,000. And he's bored, he's tired, he doesn't want to be there, he doesn't like his job. And he's gonna say, I don't want to be doing this. And he's gonna say 1,400 or something really quickly or something. So I.
Jared, the
Starving
attorney
one.
just said, if you went to a judge, he would say, you have to go with what the rent control
The
board.
peppermint or spearmint?
No, what he said was that the rent control board would have to approve it and then it would go in front of the judge.
Can I want to offer something.
Come on, I got Lucinda and Jared some dinner here
You don't
too.
have it for everybody.
I'm fine, you guys.
I'm okay, don't worry about it. I'll take it.
This is one that is also sensitive too because you've been paying this rate for a long time. That's something that I think.
Sorry, what was that?
That this, while we all agree that it's a real bargain. This is a level that they've been paying for a long time.
However, it's a hardship that we determined was because of the rent control board. If the rent control board wasn't in place, the landlord would be battling outside and.
But the rent control is in place, Jared.
Like,
Like,
that's why we're doing this.
and the rent control is in place to make sure that we maintain, low rents or affordable rents for tenants, right? And all, like, if we increase it to we're just passing
I'm
the
not
burden
increasing
down to the.
Market's 1,900. We're going to 1,350, which is like still $600 below market.
So why don't we split it like how we did before and do the negotiate?
Well, I would be willing, if we're gonna negotiate,
Right?
I'd be willing to split it and say, split the difference between the 1127 and the 1352 and allow him to, with board approval, to raise it 6 or 7% a year for the next 3 years. So he's not, or 10% a year.
That compounding, that adds up to way more than what we would be giving up, we're giving
No,
25.
No, it doesn't.
Mhm.
Like, do the math.
I mean, I estimate in my head.
If, let's say, so go to 1225 or something, and then allow him to slowly, because she's never gonna move out, and I don't blame her. So allow him to get twice the rent control increases every year.
Twice?
Yeah, well, it's 3.8%. My energy bill went up.
When you compound
9%
percentages
last
though,
year.
like that's gonna end up being like a much bigger increase than like what your 13 whatever puts them at, and then just stable, like moving stable over time. So what you're proposing is actually more than what you originally proposed.
What was your?
Over
number?
4 years.
Mine was 1127.
What if, it was
And
11?
what's yours, Jared? 1380?
1350.
1350?
What if it
The
was
difference
11
between the two is 223.
Diane's on stack.
1127 for 6 months, and then he was allowed to increase it a couple percentage.
5% a year. Five.
Rather than
5%,
being
some
locked in.
percentage above whatever they see, whatever the rent control board.
1 or 2, I mean 1%.
1% is like $2.
Right, but over time that compounds into a lot of money.
100 years. I'm 50. I'm gonna be dead in 20 years. I'm sorry, I'm not 20 or 30 like all of you.
Uh-huh.
20 or 30.
I just wanted to refute the fact that you'll be dead in 20
Yeah.
I think.
Hold on. Terry's on stack. Let's go back to this.
I just had a question. I don't know, maybe I'm opening cameras, but when would the increase go into effect? You know, right?
Just decided tonight it would go into effect February 1st.
It could be that quick.
Which is how many paychecks away for the tenants? 0?
Well, I was wondering if there would be like, let's say, whatever we agree on, they couldn't do it. Would they have no opportunity to find another place?
The difference
between
Right, they wouldn't be able to move out at
You
that
know.
point if they disagree with that. I think we need to give them more like
that?
time.
I'm just trying to be
That's a
practical.
good consideration, yeah.
Well, then you could push it back.
That I think we have to do that because if we're raising these beyond what was allowable and they can't do that or don't want to do it, accept the term, we have to give them time to find a place
Or find the money.
or find the money, right? That's why that's how many paychecks away that is. Like,
Well, I was just wondering, because that was, I was trying to think of both sides. I was like, well.
I would
let's
say the difference between
But that affects their
1350
bottom
and
line.
1127 is $223.
mhm.
How about splitting like you did before?
All right, so that would be what, 23 divided by 2.
Of course, it's 111.50.
That's
That's
well,
not
let's do the 50.
beautiful.
Pretty much.
So what am I saying, 111?
Say 115, and that's.
Okay.
All right,
115, okay.
115, where does that put us?
12.
So over the 1127?
Mhm.
Yeah.
1247 or something. Like that.
1120, I thought it was 10.
No, I thought we
240
were
or
doing it
whatever.
over Heather's proposal.
My proposal is,
Oh.
Yeah. 11.
So that'd be 1242,
what,
1242,
1242?
1,242.
And what is that percentage increase?
Yeah, what's the percentage?
Over right this minute?
Yes.
That's still an extra $200 a month.
That's a 20%, 19.4,
20%.
What was it?
19.4.
19.4.
But in fairness to the tenant now, she's capped at 3.8% next year. No.
Whatever it is
This
next
year.
year.
Whatever, yeah.
We
It
don't know what
won't
it'll
be the way the economy's going, the CPI is gonna be lower. So it'll be 3.5% or 3% next year. So,
Inflation?
so So she's gonna have a 3% increase next year probably, which is gonna be $40 next year more. So she'll be paying for $12.80 in 2025. You know what I mean? So, and she's still doing really well compared to the market rent. She's still doing really, and yes, she's paying more, I agree, but you have to also consider that whatever it would be, if the rent control board wasn't in place, she would be paying significantly more probably than 1240.
Right. And again, hypothetical, we all understand that exists. A lot of people are going to be paying a lot more if the rent control wasn't in place, or else there would be no purpose for us to have the rent control or have the ordinance, right?
The hardship.
Right. So, but, and we're taking the hardship very seriously and trying to take that into consideration, or we wouldn't be allowing it to go over the, the ordinance amount. So that 1242 represents almost a 20% increase, which I think applying that all at once is difficult. I have a counter proposal to your percentage increase allowable over time, but rather dollar amount. So half of that amount, half of that increase would be now, and then half of it would be applied plus the percentage, the allowable percentage next year, rather than putting it as a percentage, because again, we don't know CPI. If CPI goes through the roof, that's going to be a whole lot more. If it goes down, like you said, that's going to be less. And so if we agree on the amount, I would say half of the increase now and half of it to like a flat increase, right? Flat rate increase now, and half of it applied the next year, and then they of course can still do percentage on top of it.
Yeah, just give me your proposal on numerically what.
Okay, so
I'm doing it for you right
what's
now.
the difference between 1242 and 1040?
$200.
$200. So they do $100 increase now, and $100 extra, $100 increase. And we can say we got to decide if it's before or after they do the percentage in 2025, but $100 added on in 2025, and then they still get the whatever the allowable amount is for 2025.
And are you doing the 100 over the current or the 100 over your 11?
200 over
the 11?
It's 200 over the current, and so I'm saying, which is a 20% increase for this one, and it's like in relative terms, that's a lot. So it'd really like 100. So it would go up 100.
So the new rent would be 1140.
It'd be 1140 for a year, and then it would go to 1240 plus the allowable percentage that for the ordinance.
I like that.
Because that takes into consideration, like, first of all, time to make decisions about things. It doesn't throw 20% on a tenant at once, and it gets them closer so that their percentage increases will mean more over time. Right?
Oh, yeah, right.
And that makes it so we can actually accurately predict it, as opposed to Jared's, where allowing them the next 3 years to go over by a certain percentage. That's we don't know what that actually works out to. If
Are you gonna do a straw poll on that one? Straw poll on that one?
I mean, I'm proposing it. Do we have other? I'd rather hear from others
Second?
first.
I am.
Yeah, so we have agreement, Jared.
I'm gonna abstain from this one because I agree.
So we're doing
213-1. What's your next one?
wait, no, I want to make sure we've recorded what we've done.
Sorry.
So we're doing up to 1242. 1242 will be the new one, but this is for 213-2. But half of it now and half of it in 2025.
So 1140 for this year
Mhm.
and 1240 next year plus the percentage.
Yeah, and let's say that they get to add the 100 before they do the percentage. That way, that percentage comes up to a dollar more, or a couple dollars more. So 1140. Yeah, instead of 1242, why don't we just do 1240? This makes the math easier. Plus we calculate the overage on the difference anyway. So 1240, we're gonna do 1140 for 2024, and 1240 plus ordinance
CPI.
Percentage, yeah, plus CPI increase for 2025. We agreed on that one. We have one more to go at 8:30 at night. I think that was the hardest one though.
Yes.
213-1, right?
currently at 1626. Retro only, meaning our own ordinance applied, 1763. The original ask was 2100.
And this is the,
This is the one where the family members.
can they not negotiate this on, I mean, you want us to do this one?
I would like you to do it.
Okay. We'll do it then.
I propose $2,600.
Sharon.
Good.
So.
So starting point is 1763. Do we give them more on top of that?
So what are they paying now?
They're paying 1626 now.
They're the ones who just moved in or not.
They
No,
just
those-
moved in?
They just,
No, that's somebody else.
1985 just moved in. 215.
yeah, the one that's the highest. Should be new.
So that's our like basic market idea of like what these units are.
And this one is the like, can we,
1985, I gotta look at the pictures.
Yeah,
I'm already-
I mean, is this the one of the more
That's
renovated ones or the
215.
unrenovated ones?
215-2 is the most renovated, followed by 213-1.
Okay, so this is not, and
So
now I
this
can
is
see
the
here, this is
second
not,
most
this is not one of
renovated.
those.
Okay.
The one, you were asking about the 1985 or the 1763?
Well, she answered my question anyway, but 1985 is not the most renovated.
Why are we talking about that expensive? Are we just?
We're
talking
just
about
trying to get straight which apartment was.
Yeah,
which.
which is which, but like, so this is 213 one, this is what we're talking about right now. And so I would not,
No, that's the 1985.
Did I get it wrong?
no, that's 215 one, hold on, sorry, 213 one.
And that is the least renovated.
And that's, 213 one is the least renovated.
The other
Oh.
one.
This one's least, where's this one? This is the only one we have left, can you
That's
tell
the
me
one
how
we're talking
renovated this
about.
is?
We're going fast, let me just like,
Alright, this is the only one I need to know, I don't need to know all of them, just this one.
Terry was asking though.
I'm over it. I was
She's
asking
over
to
it.
try to help and I wasn't.
This is the only one we have to decide now, which, where is this in the ranking of?
That is more renovated.
It's one of the more renovated. Okay, that's good to know. So this is one of the more renovated units. 213-1.
Currently 1626, allowable 1763.
Mhm. And the ask was 2100.
21. You could try to split it. What's the difference between the ask and?
And maybe for this one, we just split the difference between where it is now and their ask. I mean, and that gets them pretty close to like the other renovated.
What was their ask?
2100.
So the difference between 1763 and
Well, that book
2100
is called
is
Split the Difference. That's the one I
337.
was trying to think of. Don't, it's like, don't split the difference.
$337.
Between the ask and where the retro would be, I'm talking about. Not where they are now. I'm talking about with the retro.
1623.
So 1760, what's the difference between 1763 and 2100?
That's 337.
What percentage increase is that?
Well, 30 about, if I divide it by 2, you mean?
No, if
From the.
if our new number,
26, the new number.
yeah, the new number.
Between, okay, I gotta do that.
If we
20
did
you
split
mean
the difference between what's allowable and what they asked
I
for,
got you, 2100 minus 1763.
we should make an Excel spreadsheet.
We could have been doing this on the
Just put
computer
in
the whole
numbers and
time.
calculate.
It's right now, that's 19%.
That's 19%?
Between 1763 and 21.
Perfect. Can we do that over 2 years?
Is everyone getting that? I thought people were getting 25% and 20%.
The last one we did was roughly 19% too, but we did it over.
And then we divided it over.
And we
2
divided
years.
over 2 years. I would say we do the same for this one because that's the difference between what they could have gotten with rent control and what they were asking for, and then it's comparable to the percentage increase of the others, and we apply it over 2 years like we did with the other one that was close to 20%. Same argument for why.
So if, looking at the dollar value,
Yeah.
you're gonna wanna, 1763. So 337 is the number, the dollar value number difference.
Between what they're paying
Between
now?
17, no.
Oh.
See, that, we were doing that between the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
retro number, not the where they are now. The percentage is higher. I did it between the retro number, not where they are now.
No, I want the retro number for splitting the difference, but then I want to know their percentage increase over what they're paying now and the dollar increase over
So
what they're paying now.
337 divided by 2 is 168. Let me just.
And 158, so it's 158.
168, and then, so if I do one.
I'm gonna do this too. 2100
Well, that
minus
comes to
1763 is 337
337.
divided by 2. So it'll be,
But
it'll
that's
be the new rate plus 168.50. We're gonna put 168. So this will be 1763.
That was the
Nope.
family.
1763 plus 168 is 1931. That gets them very close to the other one. And then the difference between what they're paying now and 1931, if we're gonna, is 1931 minus what we pay, 16,
that's
26.
it's 19%,
Is-
18.7.
Right, and that's a so that's a 305 increase. I would say we make it a $300 increase. We do 150 increase this year and same deal, 150 increase next year plus the allowable percentage.
Mhm. So just to be clear, 1626 plus 150 is 1776.
So it'll be 1776. Isn't that when our country was founded?
And then your
Lucky
suggestion
number.
plus the 150 and then the increase on top
And then what's 1776 plus another 150?
is 1926.
So in 2025 is what was that? Sorry.
1926.
Oh yeah.
Plus
19
whatever we establish as the
Whatever.
CPI.
1926 plus percentage increase. Does that sound acceptable to everyone? This was going up again, a comparable percentage to the others, but we're doing it over time and it amounts to, in nominal terms, $300 increase and brings them up to after 2 years, it brings them up really close to their other one that they negotiated at with the ability to negotiate it at market value, right? So even though they asked for 2,100, they were able to, the price is set by supply and demand, and the buyer, the consumer was willing to pay that amount, and they were willing to sell it for that amount. So I think that that's fair. Not buy and sell in that sense, rent, but
Sounds good.
all right.
I agree.
I agree.
So did you get all that, Terry?
Yeah, I'm gonna read it out just so I don't, we just know what everybody's doing. Hold on.
213-2 is going up to. Sorry, 215-2 we did first. That one's going up to 1680. We decided all at once. 213-2 going up to 1140 in
I have it when you finish it.
2024.
Everybody should do it and then we compare.
Yep, I think that's right. And then 1240. What was the last one? Last thing we looked at, 213.
Last one was 1926.
Plus the allowable
Plus the
increase.
allowable increase.
Yeah, so 1776 in the first year and then 1926 in the second year plus percentage. Where does that put the landlords then? Should we, since we're considering their hardship, where does that put them in terms of, in 2025? We don't know the percentage yet, but in 2025, where does that? What have we added to the revenues?
Can we just do it as?
200 plus 300 for the two,
I have to
500.
put in the 1985. Why don't we just do it for 2024, if you don't mind?
Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
Keeping in mind that in 2025, if the one apartment is vacated, they can.
They can do it by a lot more, yeah. Well, the one that's we know is gonna be vacated in 2025 or sooner. We didn't increase it over 2 years, so there's.
Right, if that's what I'm
If
saying.
you tally 1776, 1140, 1985, which is that existing rent,
Uh-huh.
and 1680, you get 6581. In 2024, as of when these leases would be in effect.
All right, and then,
And in 2025, it's hard to do because unless we want to.
well, it brings it up at least another $300 on top of what are the percentage and then whatever they're able to negotiate for or rent it for after they leave.
So yeah, I guess you could just, if you want to assume times 1.3, maybe at 67, 78 in next year, if nobody left and you just did a 2%. depend, and that's probably a low.
Yep.
At least it isn't really enough.
And I mean, and these are significant increases over what 3.8 is what's, allowed. We've given them retro and we've also given them on top of that, another, which is what, 9%, 8 point something, once it's compounded, and we're giving them another, close to 10% on top of that. Except for the one that they're gonna be able to increase in the near term anyways. Can somebody move this as the chair will entertain a motion to move this as a full package officially, and so we can take a vote? And
I,
so moved.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, Diane moves, Lucinda seconds.
Excuse me, do you mind saying what the final number is going to be, the total for our rent? Just one more time.
6581 is what.
For the first year, and then the second year will go up to beyond,
That's just
and
if
also.
everything went into effect, including your 1985 215-1.
What's the rents for 213.2 and 215.2 for this year?
213.2 was
Here.
1140 in year 24 and 1240 in 2025, plus whatever the allowable increase.
So-
will be.
Here's what, yeah, so right now, I'll just go through them again. 215.2 in 2024 goes up to 1680. We didn't do anything for 2025, they're leaving. 213-2 goes up to 1140 in 2024 and 1240 plus percent increase in 2025. And then 213.1 goes up to 1776 in 2024 and 1926 plus percentage increase in 2025.
Do we have a provision what happens if 215.2 doesn't leave?
I mean, you
It's just the
can,
rent control. I had just written down it would be.
then you can bring it back here. How's that?
Oh, no.
That's very expensive.
We're,
All right.
That sounds,
we're happy to write that in.
Yeah, so you write it in the contract. They're agreeing to write it in the contract, so we can put that here, that
I'm
that's part of
sorry.
our.
The reason we're here, it says, we're tired just like everybody else, but it says our month to month, this year, we will be paying around $6,600 per month.
That's just
But
PIT.
right.
that's
Guys,
just.
I'm sorry, I have to call a point of order here because we're first of all in the middle of a vote and we've already gotten all the information that we can get. Right, like we have all the information from you. We know what everything says. This is what we've come to. So we have to, like, the negotiations are done at this point, right? Or the deliberations are done. We need a vote. So Diane moved what the package that or the increases that we for all three, or can we get a second? Lucinda seconds. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
I will aye. Noes, nays? Wait, is that an A?
None, no nays.
No nays, abstentions, no abstentions. All right, motion passes.
Before we all roll out.
Oh, wait.
There is another public comment just for anything
Right.
not related to.
So
the-
public comment for things unrelated to this particular case,
Why?
but please related
You
to
have
rent
to,
control.
it's a public zip up thing. Garrett, you'd have to come up to the mic.
I guess I'll ask my question in a way that's in an effort to to be free of bias, because I think my question may apply to any other cases where you do proceed with an increase or where there's a clause similar to what Nick and Michelle are agreeing to. So my question is simply a legal one, which is just how we would handle if, I trust their character, but if for whatever reason in the future a tenant does stay, are we just saying that they would become a holdover tenant? Like what's going to be the legal requirement, since this is a new provision that we're adding?
This is Ed.
So if you had not the good tenants you have, but if you had a wicked tenant and they just wanted to hang around and they're on a month to month,
No, I don't think that's the question.
Right.
Yeah, they are asking like,
It would be
what happens if they don't leave?
It would be, do you want me to go back up?
Yeah. Oh,
Like
like
they're-
what increase would be allowed?
Well, no, just what happens,
No,
just
what they
period, what
would
happens.
It would be essentially, they'd be on an expired one-year agreement with a clause in their agreement. Their agreement would have expired and they would be violating the clause that they agreed to vacate,
right, so.
which would be atypical to be in a lease agreement.
So they would
typically.
go on, they don't have a written lease, they would go on to a month-to-month tenancy. And you could terminate that tenancy with 30 days plus 1 day notice. you kick them out.
I guess the difference here is because there's the clause of agreeing to vacate, where a regular,
Take them to landlord tenant court and enforce the clause.
and enforce it.
Yeah, not so enforceable.
That wouldn't, I guess that wouldn't come back to here then.
No.
I don't want
Because that
to
was the-
step on any toes, but NJSA 2A 1861.3 or 61.4 states that a clause in the lease that states residential lease that states that a tenant will vacate on a certain date is void and unenforceable.
Right, because that's simply responding to
We could theoretically charge them double rent under the statute.
There you go. Charge them double rent.
You can get rid of that. And they're not coming back here.
And just to be clear, I was responding to, because you had said, come back here, but I guess that.
Well, no, if you wanted to increase it more, like let's say they get jobs at Rutgers and they want to stay, we've given you, that one has the least amount of increase percentage wise, because we know that they're leaving, you'll be able to raise it up to market
By the
later.
way, I'm sorry, Drew, quick question, just so we have it on the
Sir,
record.
the chair has the floor, hold on. So we made this decision based on this particular case. So if they decided they wanted to stay because they got jobs, you could come back, because we didn't increase it like we did with the others as much. You could come back here and we would consider that, because we made our decision for theirs being less of an increase than everybody else's because they're leaving. All right, public comment. Oh,
Then you might, hang on. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Anna Lima. I wanted to make a comment regarding how each rent increase is determined, not only today, but for future cases. A lot was mentioned about what tenants can afford and cannot afford, and of course, going back and forth as to how much money each person might have sitting around and who can afford which increase next. With that comment, would it also be making sense to request the salaries of each tenant in order to come to that conclusion as to what percentage their living expense is in comparison to their salaries?
I think that it actually going forward should be almost a blind tenant income, and we got emotional about it and
I actually disagree with that.
Okay, never mind. So you answer.
I mean, the whole point is we're tenants and like Matt said, these are human people and they're Highland Parkers, they're Highland Park residents, and we know you are too. That's why we consider this. And we gave you an increase, like almost double.
Covering their mortgage.
It's almost double what the allowable increase is. Sorry, you had the floor.
She was asking.
I don't believe, I mean, that's pretty, I don't believe we could ask them for their salary information. I think that'd be a little bit too difficult for them to, I mean, if people describe that they're young and they're starting out and they're graduate students and so on, I think you can make a fair assumption that they're not making a whole ton of money. So I think it'd be a little offensive to have them come in with their tax returns and show how much they actually make and to do a 30% calculation and say you can pay it. I don't think we can do that.
I agree. However, he did mention around how much he makes. Just the last tenant never mentioned that.
Right.
So I think that is a fair point to make, that perhaps she can afford that, and to get the tenants' input as well as to what they can afford going forward with the increases.
And it's a fair inquiry.
We also didn't ask the landlord to provide.
Provide their income
assets or income.
Their application. I'm sorry, Mike.
I'm sorry, I thought you were pointing my direction earlier.
Come up here, public comment.
I just want to ask a question of the chairperson, just for the record. Do you work in the same department as the residents who live in 215 too?
I do not. I had never seen them before until we came here.
Okay, because I thought you said something.
I said I negotiated their contract for 9,000 people that when we were on strike, you might have heard.
Okay.
So I don't know them, and
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a
Nope.
conflict.
I would have disclosed a conflict of interest for sure. To the extent that they're like in the same boat as the other, I mean, half of Highland Park and the other 9,000 faculty that, I was at the table for. That's it.
I don't see any hands raised on Zoom.
Anybody else from the public would like to make a comment? All right, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Objections? Motion passes, meeting over.